My husband confessed to having an affair with my sister. Just as I found out I was pregnant, what should I do? I am 35F, and I have been married to my spouse, Henry, 37M, for 5 years. Our marriage seemed to be going well until my spouse suddenly admitted to having an affair with my sister. We both work as doctors at a large university hospital, you see. Outsiders may find that glamorous or satisfying, but it also adds a layer of complexity to our relationship. Our marriage hasn't always been picture perfect because of the long hours, the emotional toll of caring for patients, and the fact that we both have a strong passion for what we do. It has been challenging to balance our personal lives with our careers, and there have been times when the demands of our work have made things much more challenging. However, we were able to help one another through it all. He was my companion, and I never doubted for a moment that I would be with him for the rest of my life. Actually, I found out I was pregnant 2 months ago. Henry and I were excited to have children when we initially got married. Despite our best efforts and dreams, it simply never occurred for us. Even though we tried for a long time. We eventually came to terms with it. We gave up on making an effort, reasoning that if it was meant to be, it would come naturally. It was difficult to let go of that dream, but we put all of our effort into our relationships and occupations, believing that destiny would lead the way. I therefore refrained from drawing conclusions right away when I started getting morning sickness. A part of me assumed it might simply be work-related stress. In order to rule out the possibility, I nevertheless made the decision to take a pregnancy test. I was blown away when the test came back positive. It was such a time of great excitement and incredulity. I never imagined that I would be looking at that small test and knowing I was pregnant after all these years. Waves of emotions swept over me, and I had to take a seat to come to terms with the fact that I was pregnant. It was a mixture of wonder and happiness. My first instinct at the time was to tell Henry the news. After everything we'd gone through together, I knew how much this would mean to him. However, he was away at the time for a number of medical conferences. I chose to wait until he came back to tell him in person since this information was too crucial to convey over the phone or in a brief text message. I was aware that witnessing his response firsthand would heighten the significance of the situation. I had everything sorted out just right for the day Henry was due back from his trip. When I received the amazing news that I was expecting, I wanted to make the occasion extra special. I made lunch for us at our favorite restaurant, which we often frequented on special occasions or when we simply needed a little alone time. It was peaceful, comfortable, and stocked with all the foods we both enjoyed, so it was a place that carried many memories for us. As I thought about how this would be the beginning of a new chapter in our life, I tried to picture his reaction when I broke the news to him. However, I could tell right away that something wasn't right when I went to pick him up at the airport. Henry appeared distracted, seemingly absorbed in his thoughts. His greeting was different from his normal one. He didn't give me a warm embrace or show pleasure at seeing me after a long time apart. I could sense the disconnect in his manner, and he hardly even said hello. I attempted to dismiss it, speculating that perhaps he had been affected by the lengthy flights or the pressure of the conference. In an attempt to cheer him up and give us a chance to catch up, I brought up the reservation at our favorite restaurant. To my astonishment, however, he sighed, clearly annoyed, and suggested that we probably just go home and cancel. He sounded abrasive, as though the thought irritated him. I was surprised by his response. Since we didn't have any other important arrangements for the day, I figured that a lovely lunch would be the perfect way to help him relax. I told him that it would be better to have a brief lunch out and then go home because we would most likely wind up ordering takeout anyhow. He nodded curtly and let out an angry groan. Then, as though I hadn't been there, he resumed staring at his phone and distractedly scrolling while I took us to the restaurant. The tension between us was heavy by the time we arrived at the restaurant. Henry didn't say much as we sat down at the table. I questioned him about the conference in an attempt to start a conversation and diffuse the tension. His answers were one-word answers that didn't lead anywhere. They were brief, aloof and chilly. He was very different from that. Usually, following these excursions, he would tell tales of the individuals he encountered, the thought-provoking discussions he attended, or the novel concepts he discovered. However, he seemed to be keeping something back this time, and I couldn't help but wonder what was actually happening. To be fair, I had observed a minor change in Henry's conduct over the previous few weeks. He had begun to seem aloof before our lunch that day. Although I was a little worried, I dismissed it as the typical stress that comes with being a doctor. At first I didn't give it much thought because our professions are hard and frequently leave us exhausted both physically and psychologically. Because of the demands of our jobs, we had both experienced difficult periods in the past, so I figured this was simply another one. I kept telling myself that after his conference, he would feel better and we would return to our regular routine, and that he would finally open up after things had calmed down. However, I started to feel increasingly nervous as I sat across from him at lunch that day. Seeing him not recognize me and hardly speak. I made an effort to ignore my nervousness though. Even though we were at odds, I was anxious to inform him about the baby since I had waited long enough to do so. I hoped that by telling him about the pregnancy, he would suddenly stop worrying about whatever was hurting him and we could both enjoy this moment that would change our lives. Henry looked up from his plate just as I was getting up the nerve to tell him, just as I was ready to break the best news of our lives. He spoke in a calm, low voice, saying what I never thought I would hear. I have been unfaithful to you. Asterisk asterisk. I didn't really pay attention to what he said at first. For a moment I believed I had misheard the clatter of talking and clinking dishes that filled the restaurant. I laughed nervously and said, "To what?" As though he had said something incorrectly. Then he looked me in the eyes, something he hadn't really done all day, and said it again, more clearly this time, in a tone that was almost emotionless. Asterisk asterisk. I've been having sex with Emma, your sister. Asterisk asterisk. The world around me seemed to stop at that very instant. My face became numb. My sister and my husband were having an affair. Asterisk asterisk Emma. Asterisk asterisk. My sister, of all people. I gazed at him, trying to make sense of what he had said. What do you mean? I questioned him again, even though I knew in my heart. Even though I didn't want to believe it, his expression made it obvious. He simply sat there and looked directly at me with such a detached and dispassionate air, as if this were just another truth he was stating, something trivial and unimportant. The man I believed I knew, the man I had loved and trusted for so many years, was nowhere to be seen, and there was no regret. Everything I had known, including our marriage, our relationship, and even my own sister, seemed to be disintegrating before my very eyes, and I had no control over it. I could feel the sting of betrayal in the pit of my breast, and tears started to fill up in my eyes. When did it start? I questioned him in a shaky voice. I had to know. Some part of me hoped that perhaps this was all an error or misunderstanding, but I wasn't sure why. Almost casually, he started telling me about his and Emma's several months of sleeping together. With every syllable, my heart fell deeper. He clarified that it all began when Emma ended her relationship with her previous boyfriend. After the separation, she was inconsolable and had begun visiting our home regularly to get assistance. I can still clearly recall those times. In an effort to support her during such a trying time, I had invited her into our house. I believed we were aiding in her recovery since she was my sister. I had no idea, though, that Henry and Emma were growing closer behind my back in ways I could never have predicted. Yes, they had been friendly from the beginning. At the time, I really recall thinking it was wonderful that my sister and my husband got along so well. Knowing how close our family was to one another comforted me. However, I never imagined they were close, that they were sharing a bed, not even in my worst dreams. The enormity of the betrayal from both of them was too much for me to comprehend. I could feel my surroundings becoming hazy as Henry went on to describe his affair. He was no longer someone I wanted to hear. Nothing made sense. I thought I was about to get sick as my stomach rumbled. I snatched my keys from the table and sprang to my feet. The fact that we were in the center of a packed restaurant didn't bother me. The possibility that people were observing didn't bother me. I simply needed to leave. As I hurried to the exit to locate my car, Henry began calling after me. I didn't see my phone buzzing till I was in the car and heading home. Of course it was Henry. He contacted me again, reprimanding me for leaving him at the restaurant and for overreacting in front of everyone, rather than offering an apology. I yelled into the phone for him to leave me alone and take an Uber. As I drove home, my heart broken and my mind racing, I could hardly see the road through my tears. I shut myself in our bedroom as soon as I arrived home. I started crying hysterically at that point because the truth of what had just transpired hit me hard. I was unable to comprehend it. My own sister and my spouse, the man I loved. How could they have betrayed me in this manner? I sobbed till my body was totally worn out and I had no more tears to shed. Henry must have returned to the house at some time. His voice was muffled by the wood when I heard him knock on the bedroom door. I couldn't stand him. Even though he insisted on talking. I was no longer able to listen to him. I curled up in a ball on the bed, my sobs smearing the pillow, refusing to open the door. I must have slept off at some point, but I'm not sure how long I remained that way. It was already midnight when I awoke. Henry had ceased hammering, and the house was oddly quiet. I was so hungry that I made the decision to go downstairs and buy some food. Henry was dozing off on the couch when I arrived in the living room, and his phone was on the table beside him. My blood boiled when I saw him sleeping there, appearing so content. After what he had just told me, how could he sleep so soundly? After standing there for a while, fuming with rage and shock, I turned to look at his phone. This was something I had never done in our whole marriage. However, I unlocked Henry's phone for the first time that evening. He was so certain that I wouldn't ever suspect him that he hadn't even bothered to change his passcode, which he had always used. He was so confident that I would always trust him. How foolish I had been. How could I have failed to notice what was going on right in front of me? My heart pounded as my sister and I went through his messages, dreading what we may discover but still having to know the whole truth. And there it was. They had exchanged several offensive pictures, each more agonizing to view than the one before. Pictures of my own sister and my husband smiling, making jokes, and organizing their covert meetings. They had even made plans to meet at different hotels while I was totally unaware of it. What broke me the most were Emma's texts. She had written in one of them about how thrilling it was to have sex with him behind my back and how the excitement of lying enhanced their relationship. She even went so far as to claim that it improved the quality of the intercourse. It was unbelievable to me that this was genuine. I had grown up with and trusted my own sister, and she had deceived me in the worst way. And our marriage was so easily ruined by Henry, the man I had promised to be with for the rest of my life. I had to have proof of what I had witnessed, so I snapped pictures of their messages on my own phone while my hands were shaking. I went back upstairs in silence after getting what I needed. I started packing. I was aware that I couldn't live in the same house as Henry. I couldn't bring up this child with a husband who had betrayed me and so severely damaged my trust. In an attempt to keep myself together, I packed a few necessities in a bag, but my hands trembled with each thing I put in and my heart was racing. After finishing, I drove directly to my parents' home, which was located in a different town. My parents were shocked to see me when I got to their house, but I couldn't tell them anything straight away. Fortunately, they didn't ask many questions that evening. I simply told them that I needed to remain with them for a bit. I've been residing with my parents ever since that evening. Yes, I am in the process of ending my relationship with Henry. After all of this, I haven't spent any time in getting a divorce. After being betrayed, there is no turning back. After learning of everything, my parents are also incensed and have cut Emma off entirely. She is no longer welcome in our family, and they are ashamed of what she did. Emma has repeatedly called me to express her regret, saying that it was all a big mistake. However, I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to forgive her. Ironically, Henry's family has been incredibly supportive, especially given that their own kid is to blame for this problem. They made it apparent that they were extremely disappointed in him as soon as they learned of his adultery. They have made a strong stand and disapprove of what he has done. He has been informed that they will not allow my sister into their family. They haven't tried to hide their distaste. It's as if they now recognize Henry for who he really is. Update. Since many of you have been inquiring about the nature of my connection with Emma and the reasons behind my sister's actions against me, let me clarify a few things. What can I say? Throughout our childhood, we had what I believe to be a typical sibling connection. Our parents loved us both equally, and none of us was the golden child of the family. There were never any serious arguments or jealousies between us. This stings even more because I have always loved my sister no matter what. I honestly worried about her when she went through her breakup 6 months ago. I am not blind to the irony that Emma's ex was discovered cheating on her with a coworker. I wanted to be there for her as her big sister because she was in complete despair. To help her recover and get back on her feet, I proposed that she remain with us for a bit. Remembering how she would confide in me about her trust concerns following her breakup is what's really getting to me right now. While she was sleeping with my husband, she would sob on my shoulder and tell me that she could never contemplate doing to someone what her ex had done to her. There are simply no adequate words to describe the degree of manipulation. Emotionally, the pregnancy has been challenging. I am reminded to share these events with my husband whenever I have a doctor's appointment or develop a new ailment. I'm dealing with this alone instead. Well, not totally alone. My parents have been amazing, and a few of my hospital co-workers have really come through for me. The impact this has had on our work lives is unexpected. Fortunately, Henry and I work in different departments at the same hospital. News of what transpired spread really quickly, and although most individuals have been professional, it's obvious whose side they support. Emma's response to everything has been especially startling. She appears to be very shocked that our parents have interrupted her. She continues to send them lengthy emails in which she emphasizes the importance of family unity and how she is still their daughter. After she made the terrible decision to betray her own sister, Mom eventually lost it and responded to Emma, telling her that yes, family *should *be together, which is precisely why they are supporting me. I appreciate how supportive Henry's family has been. In particular, his mother has been amazing. She has made it plain that I will always be a member of their family, regardless of what happens with Henry, and she calls me frequently to see how I and the baby are doing. She told me that she is really ashamed of her son's behavior and that she taught him better than this. Concentrating on my child is what's enabling me to proceed. Every time I see them on an ultrasound or feel them move, it serves as a reminder that even the most dire circumstances can yield something lovely. Even though I'm still afraid of becoming a single mother, I know it's preferable to remaining in a marriage with someone who could completely deceive me. After learning about my pregnancy, I'm relieved Emma broke up with Henry. Unfortunately, he lost her as well. The man had the gall to end our marriage in the hopes of getting away with a younger me. Naturally, this does not imply that I will ever forgive Emma, but I am relieved that Henry is now alone. I'm taking each day as it comes for the time being. Despite all the stress, I'm attempting to concentrate on keeping my pregnancy healthy while the divorce proceedings proceed. I'm thankful to everyone who has helped me along the way, and I'm gradually realizing that sometimes the family you select is more resilient than the one you were born into. I have no idea what the future may bring, but I do know that my child and I both deserve better than what Henry and Emma did to us. Update 2. Henry made the decision to visit my parents' house once more in an attempt to make things better, but this time the situation worsened. He began by attempting to persuade me to reconcile. He explained to me that parents must occasionally give up something for their kids. He continued by saying that our child deserved to have two parents rather than just one. However, I had had enough of this story. I told him straight out that he didn't even *1* this baby until recently. For heaven's sake, he had wished for me to miscarry. And all of a sudden, he's talking about the value of sacrifice and family. He attempted to change his mind when I threw that in his face, claiming that perhaps he would change his mind after holding the kid. Like all his previous promises, his words were empty. I confronted him directly. He had an affair with my sister. We had almost little possibility of ever reconciling. However, Henry chose to turn the tables on me rather than take accountability. He began to blame me for his affair, claiming that I was constantly preoccupied with work and that I had not shown him affection for months. This was typical Henry, always attempting to place the blame elsewhere and make me feel responsible for his treachery. Before we were married, he was well aware of who I was. Before we met, we had worked together for years, so why was he acting so startled now? He began complaining about Emma at that point. He accused me of failing to recognize that he had been unfaithful to me for months and said that she had failed to support him when he was feeling weak. He seemed to be apologizing to me for not spotting him in the act sooner. By this time, I was furious. I bluntly informed him that he should quit blaming me for his adultery. His own parents, who had sided with me for a reason, were aware that what he had done was unacceptable. Henry sneered, his haughtiness returning, and declared that his parents loved him and would always forgive him. I was unable to contain myself at that point. I was honest with him, telling him that his parents had already chosen to deny him his inheritance and were done with him. Furthermore, our infant was receiving all of that money rather than him. When he realized, I saw his face fall apart. He was speechless for the first time since it all started. In a moment, his typical self-assurance and smugness disappeared. To be honest, I did get a sense of fulfillment from seeing him consider the repercussions of his behavior. He began screaming at me, calling me nasty and vile for ruining his life and expressing his regret that he had cheated on me earlier. Since this whole argument was becoming meaningless, I simply shook my head and requested him to go. Henry then became quite near to me and began yelling, which really unnerved me. At this time my parents, who had attempted to keep me in the other room, heard Henry's loud statements and came out to see how I was doing. My dad quickly came over and yanked Henry away when he realized that he was only inches from my face and that I was flinching. I saw my father strike Henry across the face. At first, Henry was confused and unable to comprehend what had just transpired. Then my dad, who was much taller than him, took hold of his collar, pulled him out, and pushed him out the door. I heard my father threatening him aloud that it would be his last day on earth if he ever revealed his face to us again. Henry has been completely silent for days after that. I suppose everything has really shook him up. Now that he hasn't texted or called, I can finally relax. I'm so appreciative that my father defended me, and I'm eager to get a divorce from this awful man and permanently end this phase of my life. Update 3. My previous update was 8 months ago. For those who have been following my journey, I just wanted to let you know how things are doing. Regarding my pregnancy, my daughter is doing well after I gave birth. In addition to continuing to see me, Henry's parents have established a trust fund for her. They have cut Henry off from the family and don't want anything to do with him. I have full custody of my child and have finally achieved the divorce I desired. For the time being, Henry's only duty is to pay child support. He paid a large amount of alimony because of his affair, but he didn't argue with me about anything during the divorce process. Henry made an effort to portray himself as a changed guy who merited partial custody during the custody proceedings. The judge, however, was unimpressed when his own parents testified about his actions and offered proof of his early rejection of the pregnancy, including his terrible yearning for a miscarriage. The best gift Emma could have given me after everything she did for me is that, although she still occasionally texts me, she hasn't disturbed me much overall. She attempted to get in touch with someone last month via a common friend, stating that she was interested in seeing her niece. I quickly shut that down. Despite being the biological aunt of my kid, she forfeited her right to participate in our lives when she decided to have an affair with my husband. The actual birth was a touching event. In fact, my mother and Henry's mother were in the delivery room with me. She swore to make sure her granddaughter would always know she was loved, despite her father's actions, and it was a wonderful moment as she held her for the first time. By making frequent visits and being the kind of grandma every child deserves, she has fulfilled her commitment. The most lovely thing that has emerged from this entire catastrophe is my kid. Fortunately, she doesn't look much like Henry, and she has my eyes. Every significant event, like her first giggle or grin, serves as a reminder that leaving was the right choice. Sharing these priceless moments with someone who had so severely betrayed me was unthinkable. Henry's parents have provided him with more than enough financial assistance. In addition to creating the trust fund, they have insisted on paying for all of my medical bills and assisting me in starting a college fund. Their grandchild should never have to rely on Henry for anything, they stated. Regarding Henry, he hasn't been around much, which is just how I want it. Beyond that, he hasn't shown much desire in being a father. He pays his child support on time, most likely because his parents are looking. He has reportedly been attempting to get back together with Emma, but she has reportedly moved to a different state and doesn't want to interact with him, according to mutual friends. Throughout it all, my parents have been my pillars of support. My dad, who has never been very emotional, becomes very mushy with his granddaughter, and they have assisted me in setting up a lovely nursery. Even after going through such betrayal, it is consoling to realize how much love is all around us. Considering everything that has transpired, I genuinely believe that I'm in a better place now. Though it no longer defines me, the betrayal still stings when I consider it. I'm not merely a woman who has had her sister and husband cheat on her. In addition to being a mother and a successful doctor, I reconstructed my life according to my own standards. I'm concentrating on my daughter's development and our new life together for the time being. Although it's not the life I had in mind, it's better than I could have ever dreamed of when I was attempting to work things out with Henry. Tricked into buying a house for my sister, I finally stopped being the family ATM and took back control of my life. This story has been consuming me for the past few months and I, 32M, need to tell it. It tells the story of how my parents tricked me into purchasing a home for them, then gave it to my younger sister Perry, 29F, and what transpired when I finally had enough. Be advised that this is a lengthy and intricate tale of financial exploitation, family deception, and ultimately defending oneself. My family had to constantly balance their finances when I was growing up. Even though we weren't impoverished, there was always a tension that was related to money. You could call my dad, 58M, a serial entrepreneur, but none of his business endeavors ever truly took off. He constantly pursued the next great chance, jumping from job to job. He would be selling life insurance one month, certain that he would succeed in the field, and then attempting to launch a home remodeling company the next, despite his lack of experience. Every new endeavor had the same cycle: initial enthusiasm, mounting annoyance, and unavoidable failure. The perpetual optimist, Mom, 55F, consistently supported Dad's decisions. She would say to us over dinner, "Your father is a visionary," just after he had left another secure career to take a chance on a dangerous project. He only needs one significant break. To keep us afloat, she took on part-time jobs, but her true job was to keep up this facade of normalcy while our financial circumstances were anything but. My sister Perry and I had a very different dynamic. I was chosen at a young age to be the family's savior and their key to a brighter future. I used this lens to examine every choice I made. I recall wanting to join the school band when I was 14 years old. My parents sat me down for a serious conversation about how the computer club would appear better on college applications, rather than encouraging my passion in music. My parents, who somehow always found money we purportedly didn't have, paid for Perry's art classes one month and her dance lessons the next, allowing her to follow whatever whimsy interests she had. In high school, the pressure increased significantly. I kept my GPA at 4.0 because it was considered bad, not because I was inherently smart. You would think I had committed a heinous sin after I received an A in AP Physics one semester. For days, my father would only talk to me when he made scathing remarks about how mediocrity isn't an option for someone who needs to support their family. Teenagers need to express themselves, Mom said dismissively when Perry skipped 3 days of school that week to spend time with her pals. Perry was finding herself, and I spent my high school years in this pressure cooker of expectations. I was supposed to create a thorough financial success strategy. Perry would easily go in beyond curfew without any repercussions, whereas I would study until 2 in the morning while fueled by energy drinks and anxiousness. It was a sharp contrast. The traditional education system just doesn't suit her learning style, was the response given to Perry's run of D's and F's, while my B+ in calculus prompted a family conference regarding my declining standards. My parents made it apparent that my only choice when it came time for college was tech school, not because it fit with my hobbies, they never inquired about those, but rather because it provided the quickest path to a well-paying career. At every stage, they made sure I realized the extent of their sacrifice by taking out loans and spending down what little savings they had. Mom used to say, "We're eating ramen so you can have a future." But oddly, there was always money for Perry's newest pastime or adventure. Tech school was harsh due to the continual pressure from home as well as the challenging homework. I lived on the cheapest possible diet, worked part-time at a computer repair business in between classes, and was constantly reminded of my parents' investment in me. Every phone conversation featured an update on their financial difficulties as well as overt clues about when I might be able to reimburse them. Perry, meanwhile, left high school during her last year. In fact, my parents applauded her choice rather than the drama I would have experienced. "Not everyone is cut out for school," they stated. "She is courageous for pursuing her own goals." She spent the following years exploring her options, which included working as a barista, store clerk, dog walker and yoga instructor trainee, all of which were part-time positions that lasted no longer than a few months. Until she eventually quit because it wasn't fulfilling her soul, every new job she took was hailed as her genuine calling. I was hired by a burgeoning tech startup after I graduated from computer school. Although the pay wasn't particularly noteworthy by industry standards, it was more than my family had ever received. I recall phoning my parents to break the news, hoping for a single, unadulterated moment of joy. Rather, Dad started figuring out how much I could give them per month right away, and Mom started making a list of all the bills they needed assistance with. To save money, I moved into a small apartment with 2 roommates. Although it wasn't ideal, I was earning enough money to buy a home of my own. I felt compelled to live simply in order to support my parents. I tried to balance their needs with my student loan payments and other living expenditures by sending them money each month. However, it was never sufficient. Dad would call with a remorseful speech about how they had given up everything for my schooling if I didn't send an extra month. My work became my haven. I poured myself into projects, gained a reputation for solving challenging issues, and began to advance in the company. Every bonus or promotion ought to have been a triumph, but instead they served as further sources of pressure. "So, you'll be able to help us more now, right?" was the constant inquiry, rather than "Are you proud of yourself?" or "What are your goals?" Perry's pattern of irregular employment and snap judgments persisted. When things went apart, she would return home after living with friends. She would enroll in online classes but stop midway through. Our parents were understanding and supportive of every setback. Despite the fact that she was well into her 20s, they would exclaim, "She's still young. She simply hasn't discovered her calling yet." What I assumed would be a typical Sunday meal at their rental apartment was actually the pivotal moment. Although I had been picking up on more clues than usual regarding their financial difficulties, I wasn't ready for what happened next. After all these years of investing in the family's future, Dad began to talk about how tired they were of renting, how their landlord was raising the rent once more, and how they needed a place of their own. The directness still took me by surprise, even though I understood where this was going. "Honey, we've been thinking," Mom replied, reaching across the table and taking my hand. "We've given up so much for you to reach this point, and you're doing fantastically now. Do you not think it's time to assist us in purchasing a home?" They let go of years' worth of pent-up guilt when I revealed that I was struggling to pay my own rent and save for the future. Dad talked about how they could have invested in me rather than saving for retirement. Mom sobbed as she talked about how all they wanted in their last years was stability. Perry, who was residing with them at the time, said that I was living comfortably while our parents were having financial difficulties. Months passed during the pressure campaign. They casually mentioned places they had seen in every phone conversation. Dad would share tales of their friends' kids who had done right by their parents, by purchasing properties, while Mom would email ads just to look at. Perry even got involved, writing to me to say that after everything our parents had done for me, they deserved this one thing. Despite my best efforts, I was susceptible to their manipulation due to decades of indoctrination. The guilt became too much. Their age, their sacrifices, and their need for stability would keep me up at night. Though years of familial dynamics are difficult to overcome, my therapist, yes, I did finally start seeing one, warned me about setting limits. I finally gave in after months of psychological combat. I persuaded myself that this was the proper thing to do even though I had saved up a respectable sum for a down payment, money that ought to have gone toward my own future. The guilt trips would end once they had a home, I promised myself. At last, they would be content and I could begin to concentrate on my own life. I purchased a basic 3-bedroom home in a quiet neighborhood, nothing extravagant. The monthly payments were difficult, but I reasoned that if I kept up my thrifty lifestyle and lived with roommates, I could manage. Everything appeared to be going well for the first several months. My parents were ecstatic, telling friends and relatives how well their son had done them and showing off their home. However, the requests increased rather than decreased. They wanted to landscape the backyard because the neighbors would judge us, and they required new furniture because the old stuff doesn't seem right in this magnificent house. Every request was accompanied by the same old guilt trip. After everything we've done for you. I continued to pay my mortgage, sending more when I could in an effort to pay it off sooner. I convinced myself that it was worthwhile to provide my parents with the security they had never had, even if I was still living with roommates and putting my own life on hold. They began discussing how nice it would be for Perry to have a secure location close by, and they made casual references to how she was assisting them in settling in, but I chose to ignore the warning flags. In hindsight, I ought to have anticipated this. I was so used to prioritizing their demands that I failed to notice all the warning signs. The events that followed compelled me to face the ugly truth of my family's relationships and make one of the most difficult choices of my life. Update 1. I'll tell you what transpired when I paid a surprise visit to the house I purchased. I wish I could say I was shocked by what I discovered, but perhaps I had a sneaking suspicion this kind of stuff was coming. It all began one weekend when I attempted to phone my folks to talk about the additional mortgage payments I had been making. They never missed an opportunity to discuss money, so it was strange that neither of them answered. I made multiple efforts before deciding to drive to the residence. Everything changed because of what I discovered there. Wearing pajamas as if she owned the home, Perry answered the door. She didn't say, "Hey, nice to see you," or even, "What's brought you here?" Rather, she asked, "Oh, what are you doing here?" With an irritated expression, as though I were breaking her schedule. As I stood there, I tried to take in everything I was seeing. I felt sick to my stomach when I entered. The entire house has been converted into Perry's private area. Her personal portraits had taken the place of our family photos on the walls, her clothes were draped over the furniture and her art supplies were strewn all over the table that had once been our parents' dining room table. She was allegedly now a budding social media personality, and the spare room had been transformed into some sort of creative studio for her latest business endeavor. "Where's Dad and Mom?" I was able to inquire while attempting to remain calm. She answered nonchalantly, as though everyone knew, "Oh, they moved out a few weeks ago. Across town, they discovered a pleasant rental. Did they not inform you?" Certainly they hadn't informed me. No one had considered mentioning that Perry had moved in and my parents had left, even though I had been making extra mortgage payments on this place. I felt like I was physically struck by the betrayal. I contacted my folks while seated on the couch, which was now adorned with Perry's throw cushions. This time, Mom responded, and her justification infuriated me. "We planned to inform you, honey. We believed this would be the ideal setting for Perry, who required a steady setting to concentrate on her career. You're doing great, and she needs time to figure out what she wants to do." Mom's voice took on that recognizable guilt-tripping tone when I brought up the fact that I was the one making the mortgage payments. "Can't you help your sister after all we've given up for you? Your additional payments will be used to cover our new rent. Everything remains within the family." I lost it at that point. Remains with family? I didn't buy this house to give Perry a free crash pad. I bought it for you and Dad. And without notifying me, you're paying your rent with my extra mortgage payments? In an attempt to manipulate me, Mom broke down in tears and said that I was being self-centered and that family members should support one another. After I obtained my IT job, Dad got on the phone and started lecturing me about how I've changed and gotten materialistic. The actual kicker? The majority of their furniture had already been transferred into their new rental, leaving Perry with the more recent pieces I had assisted them in purchasing for the property. I was the one who was really footing the bill, and they had planned this entire event without ever contacting me. I'm focusing on building my brand right now, Perry responded with a shrug when I questioned her about her involvement in the mortgage. She replied, I'll be able to help out once I get my social media following up, as she opened a new ring light that she was probably buying with the additional cash I had been giving for the mortgage. I alternated between anger and incredulity during the drive home. The family first lectures, guilt trips and years of manipulation were all meant to keep me footing the bill while I put my own life on hold. I've been allowing myself a few days to calm down and gather my thoughts before deciding what to do next. A part of me wants to halt all payments right away and let them face the repercussions. Fighting against years of training and worrying about being the bad son who left his family is another aspect. However, one thing is certain, this cannot go on. I have had enough of being the family ATM. This weekend, I've planned a meeting with my parents to establish some clear guidelines. Perry must either start making a sizable mortgage payment or something will need to change. I'll provide another report following the meeting, but I already have a feeling it won't be pleasant. My parents are skilled manipulators of emotions, and I have no doubt that they are already preparing their case. But for the first time in my life, I'm prepared to defend my position, even if it means playing the antagonist in their tale. I'm aware of the irony. My sister lives rent-free in a home I pay for, but I continue to share a room with her. I sometimes question how I allowed things to get to this point, but I suppose that's what happens when you're subjected to manipulation and guilt from your family for years. Update 2. Things didn't go as planned when I confronted my folks. In fact, it went worse than I had anticipated. Allow me to describe what transpired during one of the most tense family gatherings I have ever experienced. When I got to their new rental apartment, I found that it was considerably more costly than their old one. I saw a big TV and some new furniture as soon as I came in. I could now pinpoint the precise source of my additional mortgage payments. They had purposefully scheduled this meeting for a family meal, presumably in the hopes that I wouldn't object when food was involved. In hindsight, I should have anticipated that they would work against me, but Perry was also present, which was not in my original plan. They started their plan before I could even begin to talk about the house problem. My favorite childhood supper was made by Mom, Emotional Manipulation 101, and Dad began displaying old pictures of me while discussing simpler times when family meant everything. I made an effort to direct the discussion toward the real problem. We must discuss Perry's living situation and the house. The mood changed at once. Mom set her fork down. Dad's expression tightened. Her phone suddenly piqued Perry's curiosity. Observe, I began. I purchased that home for you and your father. Now that you've moved out and given it to Perry, you're paying your rent with my extra money. I wasn't told about any of this, and that needs to change. Dad went on the attack right away. You're keeping score now then? Following all that we have done for you? He produced a notebook, a real notebook, in which he had recorded all of the costs they had ever expended for my schooling. Should we discuss our expenses for your tech school? What did we give up? Mom, who can cry on command, I promise, adopted a different tack. Tears already welling up. Mom added tearfully, we thought you'd understand. Perry is having a hard time figuring out her path, and we just want both of our children to succeed. Isn't that what family does? Support each other? I'm actually working really hard on my social media presence. I've gained 200 followers this month. The house gives me the perfect backdrop for my content. My lifestyle influencer career is about to take off, Perry said, eventually looking up from her phone to share her viewpoint. Perry, you're living rent-free in a house I'm paying for while I'm still sharing an apartment with roommates. How is that fair? I was hearing, and I couldn't believe it. Not everything is about money. You're so privileged with your tech job, you don't understand how hard it is for creative people like me, she said, rolling her eyes. Then they delivered another bombshell. Mom hesitantly said they had already gotten quotations for the makeover and told Perry she could turn the garage into a content creation studio, expecting me to pay for it, of course. This stops now. Either Perry starts paying her fair share of the mortgage, or we need to figure out a different arrangement. I lost it at that moment. We put you through school. We sacrificed everything for your success, and now you're going to deny your sister the same chance, said Dad, slamming his hand on the table. The same chance? I chuckled sourly. This isn't about chances, it's about responsibility. Perry left high school and has never worked for more than 3 months. How can you be so cruel? We raised you better than this. Perry needs stability to pursue her dreams, Mom said, her tears growing more intense. I yelled back, what about my dreams? I've sacrificed everything for this family, including my own dreams, living with roommates, saving for the future and paying for a house I can't even live in. From there the debate got more heated as Dad began to enumerate all the sacrifices they had ever made for me. Mom continued to sob about her commitment to the family, and Perry accused me of being envious of her imminent success. Starting next month, I'm only paying the basic mortgage, no extras. I finally made my ultimatum. If Perry wants to stay in the house, she needs to contribute. If not, we need to sell it. Mom complained that I was ruining the family, Dad branded me materialistic and ungrateful, and Perry stormed out, accusing me of ruining her career before it had even begun. You would think that I had suggested setting fire to an orphanage. On the journey home, I began to reflect on all the years I had spent trying to please them. All the sacrifices I'd made, all the guilt I'd carried, and for the first time, I realized how manipulative they were. I left that night feeling both exhausted and oddly free. Dad sent multiple angry texts about my betrayal. Perry has posted ambiguous social media updates about toxic family members and dealing with haters. Mom has been calling nonstop and leaving heartfelt voicemails about how they can't afford their rent without my help, and I've already contacted the bank to stop the extra payments. I've been the family ATM for too long, putting everyone else's demands before my own, but I'm not giving up this time. If they can't see that, perhaps more serious measures are in order. For the first time in my life, I'm willing to put myself first, even if it means becoming the antagonist in their story. But I have a sense that this isn't quite over yet. Update 3. Let me tell you how everything finally fell apart and where I am now. Following that final encounter, I took the most difficult decision of my life. I stopped making mortgage payments altogether. My phone exploded in the first week after I stopped making payments. I received 47 calls from Mom, 23 from Dad, and even messages from Perry on every social media site imaginable. I blocked them all, but they got creative, using friends' phones, making new accounts on social media, and even reaching out to relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. I can't sleep knowing my son has abandoned us, was the first guilt-tripping statement in Mom's voicemails. We'll lose everything because of you, was the next desperate statement. In his more combative communications, Dad said, no son of mine would do this to his family. Of particular relevance was Perry's campaign against me on social media. She began sharing stories of toxic family members that ruin your dreams on a regular basis. The surrealist part was when I looked at Perry's Instagram and noticed that she was charging $50 per session for her insights into the influencer lifestyle, while holding creativity classes in the property I was paying for. She used my financial crisis as engagement material for her fans and turned the living room into a content-producing space. The bank sent out their first notice around week 3. My parents sent it to me with a single message instead of addressing the issue. Is this what you want? To see your family homeless? I archived the email without answering. The flying monkeys then appeared. I received calls from family friends I hadn't spoken to in years, expressing their disappointment with my decisions. I was ruining my parents' golden years, according to a long correspondence from my aunt. My former high school instructor even expressed concern about my recent changes in lifestyle on Facebook. None of them were aware that I had finally begun therapy and was recovering from years of emotional and financial abuse. My therapist assisted me in realizing that my family had established a situation in which I was always in charge of everyone's welfare except for my own. Perry's Rise Above Surviving Family Betrayal podcast, which was taped in a house I purchased, was the true turning point. The first episode focused on her affluent tech bro brother's jealous attempts to crush her goals. In fact, she was able to garner a modest following from those who understood her plight. The bank's notices grew more serious after the second month. My parents changed strategies and sent me pictures of homes they were considering, all of which were far less expensive than the rental they were renting at the time. Mom texted from a different number, "See, we're trying to compromise." However, I saw that Perry had not yet been asked to help or find a space of her own. Perry hosted a Farewell to My Dream Space broadcast, complete with theatrical monologues about overcoming adversity, in response to the approaching foreclosure. For her emergency relocation fund, she even created a GoFundMe page, carefully omitting the fact that she had never made any payments on the residence. Finding out that Perry had been renting out one of the rooms to another content provider and keeping the money for himself was the last straw. This came after Mom had called me in tears, explaining that they were unable to make any mortgage contributions. Perry had to quickly relocate her content development business back to our parents' rental when the bank eventually gained ownership of the house. She took care to record everything for her fans, portraying herself as a victim of uncontrollable events. I found it ironic that she never mentioned the true source of the house's funding. Dad gave me a final call, which I did answer. His voice was low, almost defeated rather than the rage I had anticipated. He remarked, "We really thought you'd cave. We never thought you'd actually let the house go." I learned all I needed to know about their perception of me from that admission. They saw me not as a son but as a steady source of revenue that they could control whenever they wanted. The fallout has been easier and harder than I anticipated. More difficult since there is a gap when you break off communication with your entire family, no matter how toxic they may be. It's easier since I'm solely accountable to myself for the first time in my adult life. I currently live in my own apartment. Though small, it belongs to me. Every choice I make is for my own future, not to satisfy the needs or desires of others. I'm finally considering purchasing a home for myself, this time just for me, as my savings account continues to increase. The family still makes an effort to get in touch now and again. Mom sends guilt-ridden, subtly accusatory holiday cards. Articles regarding unappreciative kids are emailed by Dad. Based on the drama in our family, Perry has reportedly remade herself as a trauma healing counselor. However, I'm finished. The sale of the house was about more than simply real estate. It was about escaping a lifetime of shame and exploitation. I've finally come to terms with the fact that sometimes establishing limits means playing the bad guy in someone else's tale. It's never too late to quit burning yourself alive to keep others warm if you're in a similar circumstance. The manipulation is more difficult than the guilt. But it's your life to live. Avoid waiting as long as I did to come to that realization. I want to thank everyone for their warm reactions and tremendous support. I learned from reading your comments that I'm not the only one who has to deal with financial exploitation in the family. I was strengthened by the accounts of so many of you who had gone through similar things. This community has been really encouraging and reassuring. Parents accused me of an affair with my brother-in-law, threw me out, and tried to destroy my career. The shocking truth uncovered. Over the past 6 years, I have established a prosperous career as a senior programmer at a large software business. My parents insist on family values and sticking together, so even though I make more than enough money to live on my own in a wonderful apartment, I've been living with them. Although they have always been domineering, I persuaded myself that it was simply their expression of affection. The environment in our home has always been complicated. This is also where my sister Emily, 32F, and her husband James, 34M reside. 3 years ago, James obtained a job close by, and our parents were overjoyed, so they moved back. With her ideal life, marriage, and grades, Emily has always been the golden child. The comparison began in our early years and has continued ever since. I love my sister, don't get me wrong, but sharing a home has been difficult. Since I work from home the majority of the time, my folks are always watching me. They keep an eye on who I speak to on video conversations, when I start work, and when I take breaks. They have persuaded themselves that this degree of engagement in my life is both required and typical. Even though my precise schedule is shown on the refrigerator, my mother frequently interrupts me in my home office during crucial meetings, saying she forgot I was working. Michael, my 29-year-old lover, lives across the nation. He has been tremendously supportive over our 3 years of long-distance dating. But he and our relationship were never accepted by my parents. They treat James as the son they never had and compare him to him all the time. They attack every aspect of Michael, including his choice to live on the West Coast, his work as a software engineer, ironically, the same field as myself, and even his attire when we video chat. James has always been cordial, not only as his wife's sibling but also as a little sister. We had a good relationship and I valued having someone who didn't criticize me all the time. He frequently defended me during family dinners when my parents began their routine comments about my life choices, as if he understood the burden I was under. Up until 2 weeks ago, everything was in control. With solemn faces, my parents summoned me into the living room. I was managing a group of developers on a significant software update during a pivotal project phase, so the timing couldn't have been worse. On my laptop, they said, they discovered offensive text that purportedly demonstrated my attempt to conduct an affair with James. I was caught completely off guard. The messages they displayed to me were obviously fake and completely out of context. Some appeared to be completely made up, while others were excerpts from business exchanges that had been altered to appear suggestive. I attempted to explain that I'm really in love with Michael and that James is like a brother to me, so I would never do anything like that. They wouldn't look, even when I promised to show them my actual message history. They refused to pay attention. I've always envied Emily's happiness, my mother said, sobbing. And she should have anticipated this because of my rebellious nature. I was a disgrace to the family, according to my enraged father. In the midst of the largest project of my career, they gave me a 24-hour notice to leave the house, a 24-hour notice to pack up my entire existence. I called my grandparents in tears and desperation. They have always been my refuge and our family's sane voice. They immediately believed me after I showed them the actual mails and gave them all the details. They took me in, provided me with housing, and helped me get through this ordeal. In order for me to continue working, my grandfather even assisted me in setting up a makeshift home office in their spare room. My father was furious to learn that I was staying with them. When I wasn't there, he actually came to their house and yelled at them for enabling me and undermining his authority. My father became even more irate when my grandfather refused to back down and stood up for me. Declaring he would never talk to them again, he stormed away. I was devastated to see my grandfather, who is normally composed, trembling with rage following that altercation. When my father began getting in touch with my place of employment, things got worse. He made outrageous charges about my inappropriate behavior and unstable mental state in emails he sent to my manager and the Human Resources Department. He even made an attempt to persuade them that I was giving competitors access to company secrets. Fortunately, my manager has been understanding and my work history speaks for itself. However, the strain is having an adverse effect. It has been embarrassing for me to have to explain these private matters to my staff. Then my granddad unexpectedly died yesterday. The agony is intolerable. He was more than simply my grandfather. He was also my confidant, my guardian, and the one who always had faith in me. The fact that my parents did not attend the funeral only makes it worse. They had left town. Later, when I was organizing my grandfather's funeral, I discovered through my cousin that they were actually on vacation, sharing photos from a beach resort on Facebook. Every happy picture they shared made my heart ache. Taking an emergency leave of absence from his job, Michael flew in to support me during this trying period. My parents appeared out of nowhere as soon as he got to my grandparents' house. As though Michael's presence was somehow improper, my father icily inquired as to why he was there. I eventually lost my temper at that point. I asked them who they believed had taken care of all the funeral planning, who had supported Grandma during her most trying time, who had stayed up late planning the ceremony, calling family, and interacting with the funeral home while they were taking selfies on the beach. Then, in an unsettling development, my father's entire personality altered. A disturbing peace took the place of the rage in his eyes. He became oddly calm and said he wanted to forgive me for what had happened with James and let the past be the past. He said he would let me stay with Grandma, but only if he got what was rightfully his. I understood exactly what he was after, therefore I was horrified by the abrupt change in his demeanor. My grandfather had been quietly successful with his investments over the last few years. My father desired his inheritance because he had accumulated a sizable nest egg. He had the gall to come and demand money after everything they had done to us and after leaving us during the funeral. He was unaware, however, that Grandpa had anticipated this. While organizing Grandpa's study the day following the death, we discovered a note hidden in his desk drawer. All it said was, "Call Bob." Bob, who had visited him multiple times over the years, was both his lawyer and an old friend. We found out that Grandpa had left everything to me when we got in touch with him. I now owned every cent of his savings. Grandma would always have a place to live, protected from anyone who would try to take it away from her, thanks to the house being signed off to her. My father broke his cool exterior when I told him this. As he accused me of controlling Grandpa and turning him against his own son, his face flushed with anger. He went on a tirade about how he deserved his parents' money and how he had always supported them. He was the one who had left his family to pursue his greed, so it was almost comical that he was accusing me of deception. In an attempt to persuade me, my mother said things like, "Didn't you try to take away your sister's happiness? You now wish for us to suffer as well." However, I refused to back down. Grandpa had made up his mind, and I was going to respect it. I clarified that Grandpa had only recognized where their priorities lay and that Bob, his attorney, could confirm all I said. I also said that there was no conspiracy. The tension in the air was oppressive as they departed. As I watched them leave, I felt both relief and grief. Relief that Grandpa had kept us safe even when he was not around, and sadness that my connection with my parents had reached a breaking point. I'm now concentrating on reconstructing my life and caring for Grandma. Throughout it all, Michael has been amazing, offering consolation and support when I needed it most. However, I can't help but wonder whether there was anything I could have done differently to avoid all of this suffering. Reddit. I realize this post is lengthy, but I had to get everything out. Everything has become more problematic because of the inheritance situation, and I'm worried that my parents might try something extreme. I would be grateful for any guidance on legal protection. Has anyone else experienced a similar situation? How did you respond to it? Update 1. Things took a turn for the worst a few days after my last update. Apparently not satisfied with simply pestering my workplace, my father has begun reaching out to our company's customers. I learned this when a representative from one of our largest clients pulled me aside in a virtual meeting to voice concerns about upsetting emails they had received about me. These emails were kindly forwarded by them. My father was methodically attempting to damage my work relationships after he somehow managed to obtain our client list. According to the emails, I was a volatile individual who was stealing business secrets and taking advantage of older family members for financial gain. The fact that he disclosed information regarding customer projects that he shouldn't have known about is very troubling. Now, since he works for a partner company, I'm wondering if James was giving him false information. The legal department of my business has been engaged. In addition to the possible harm to my reputation, they are taking this extremely seriously because my father's activities are endangering business partnerships. My parents received a cease and desist letter from them, which only appears to have made them more angry. My parents have responded by launching a full-scale campaign against me on social media. In order to disseminate their story, they have made numerous phony personas in addition to publishing on their own ones. The stories they are narrating are getting more complex. They now assert that I have been deliberately deceiving my grandfather for years and that I somehow planned out his whole investing strategy to suit my own interests. They are unaware that I discovered something startling while looking through more of Grandpa's documents. Classic Grandpa, always the meticulous planner, had a secret compartment in his desk drawer that held a USB drive and a pile of papers. Along with comprehensive documentation of what seems to be systematic tax fraud and money laundering through my father's real estate business, the USB drive included years' worth of email correspondence between him and multiple offshore accounts. I informed Grandpa's attorney, Bob, about these results right away. He wasn't surprised, which was an odd response. Grandpa had apparently been gathering this information for years, recording each dubious business transaction and suspicious activity. Even photos of meetings with well-known dishonest business people were included in the folder. Bob clarified that Grandpa had been assembling evidence but was holding off on taking action until the perfect time. A set of emails revealing that my father had been embezzling money from his own parents' accounts for years was the most upsetting finding. Probably thinking they wouldn't notice, he had managed to get access to their financial portfolio and had started taking little amounts out. Grandpa did notice though, and instead of confronting him right away, he decided to record everything. To examine all the evidence, Bob is currently collaborating with a group of forensic accountants. According to him, we have more than enough to possibly file criminal charges in addition to defending against any legal claims my parents might make. I have mixed feelings about this. While I desire justice, I still find it difficult to imagine my own father being charged with a crime. James's eagerness to return to my parents' house is further clarified by the evidence. He and my father exchange a number of emails about business prospects that seem eerily similar to Ponzi scams. I'm beginning to question whether the entire charge that I attempted to woo James was a preemptive move, meant to discredit me should I ever find out what they were doing. In the meantime, my mother has started calling my grandmother every day, alternating between threatening her and guilt-tripping her. The most recent strategy is asserting that my father's health is suffering due to the stress of my betrayal, and that I will be held accountable if anything were to happen to him. On Bob's recommendation, my grandmother, God bless her, has begun recording these calls. We've put in new cybersecurity procedures and placed security cameras throughout the house to keep ourselves safe. Bob suggested that I freeze my credit and assisted me in securing all of my accounts. When my parents see their intimidation strategies aren't working, he fears they may attempt a financial retaliation. My job has been suffering due to the stress, but in a surprising turn of events, this has improved my standing inside the organization. My manager has been tremendously supportive after seeing the proof of my father's harassment campaign. My application for a completely remote job has been expedited, so I won't ever have to worry about working from my parents' house again. Throughout it all, Michael has been my pillar of support. In a spare room at my grandmother's house, he has assisted me in setting up a safe home office with backup systems and secured communications. We're also talking seriously about his moving to a job nearer to me, but I'm concerned that this would make my parents even more of a target. To help me cope with everything, I've started going to a therapist. She is assisting me in realizing that I am not to blame for anything and that it is acceptable to feel both love and resentment for my parents. Processing the knowledge that the folks who raised you are not who you believe them to be is a difficult process. We are currently awaiting the completion of the forensic accountant's analysis. Within a few weeks, Bob continues, we should have a good picture of the scope of my father's financial crimes. I'm getting ready for whatever might happen next. My parents, who know me well, will not tolerate this. I appreciate your prior support, Reddit. I never thought my family's drama would reveal something so significant. Has anybody else learned that their parents committed financial crimes? How did you decide whether or not to report them? I'd really appreciate some advice on this. Update 2. Emily arrived at our home this morning without warning. As I prepared myself for another altercation, I saw a broken lady instead of rage. Her normally flawless appearance was unkempt, and her eyes were red and puffy. She broke down in tears before I could even inquire what was wrong. She sobbed and told what had transpired. James had been in Chicago on a purported work trip. Emily had flown out to his hotel in order to surprise him. She believed a romantic gesture may help ease her feelings of insecurity over their relationship. Rather, she entered his room and found him with another lady. It wasn't the worst part, though. Emily insisted on seeing his phone during their heated argument. The whole story of our family was broken by what she discovered. The offensive messages that had caused me to be expelled. I never made them. To escape suspicion, James had kept one of his mistress's phone numbers under my name. Using my name as a front for at least 3 different women, he had been having several encounters. The most startling aspect of all was perhaps how our parents reacted when Emily told them this information. Rather than offering their heartbroken daughter assistance, they advised her to remain silent and try to resolve the situation with James. They cared less about Emily's happiness and more about keeping up appearances. To spare the family the shame of a divorce, they even advised her to forgive him. Then Emily found something much more unsettling. She discovered emails on James's laptop that showed he and our father had been involved in more than just family affairs. Together, they had established a number of shell corporations to conceal funds from investors and taxes. James has been directing contracts to these shells at exorbitant pricing by virtue of his position at his company. Accounts in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands were found via the money trail. Emily discovered pictures of James having meetings with strangers, all of which were stored in a secret folder called insurance. James appears to have kept records of everything, most likely for protection against any attempts to expose him. Another realization dawned on me as Emily told me these specifics. Not only was the inheritance at the center of the recent harassment of my clients and workplace, but it was also a frantic attempt to discredit me before I might learn of their financial machinations. They thought I might eventually find their digital trail because I work in technology. My sister is currently residing at Grandma's house with us. She is working with Bob to document what she has discovered and has filed for divorce. In addition to harming James, the data she presented could have disastrous consequences for our father. She discovered certain transactions that were exactly in line with the documents Grandpa had been gathering. The irony of it all? For years, James had been living beyond his means, using the proceeds of these illicit operations to fund his numerous affairs. In addition to wanting to be near James's place of employment, they moved back in with our parents since they were having financial difficulties as a result of his extravagant spending on his covert life. Through all of this, Emily has shown incredible bravery. She has already discussed her findings with the FBI, who are especially curious about the financial fraud's global components. She has been informed by the investigators that this case may be worth millions of dollars. Our parents' approach has entirely altered. They are now attempting to argue that they were duped by James and were unaware of the true situation. However, the data points to a different conclusion. Documents we have discovered reveal that our father was the mastermind behind numerous of these plots, with James acting as the front man for his business. Emily is suffering from the stress of it all. For the first time in our adult lives, we have been spending evenings discussing things, and she has begun visiting her own therapist. She has repeatedly expressed regret for not trusting me and for allowing James and our parents to influence her. Since she was just as much a victim of their manipulation as I was, I have forgiven her. Grandma has been incredible during this entire ordeal. She said Emily needed the master bedroom more than anyone else at the moment, so she gave it to her. We've resumed having dinners as a family, just the 3 of us and Michael when he comes over. It's amazing how tragedy can unite people and forge new ties from the ashes of past ones. Our cooperation is complete, and the FBI inquiry is still going on. Our parents are still working to preserve their reputation in the neighborhood and have engaged pricey attorneys, but more people are discovering the truth every day. Our father's former business partners have begun to come out with their own accounts of dubious activities. Sometimes Reddit, the reality is more amazing than you might think. I'm finally with my sister again, and we're stronger together than we were before. We're getting ready for what is probably going to be a protracted court struggle, but at least we're doing it together as a family. A true family founded on support and truth rather than deceit and manipulation. Has anyone else experienced a similar situation where revealing a single family secret revealed a whole network of dishonesty? How did you handle the fallout? Update 3. The pace of progress has exceeded everyone's expectations. The FBI intervened last Friday morning when my father and James were enjoying their customary business breakfast at their preferred high-end eatery. I will never forget the expressions on their faces as they were carried out in handcuffs, directly in front of the city's most affluent business community. In an instant, their meticulously constructed image of prosperous business people fell apart. Teams attacked their offices, our parents' home, and a number of storage units we were unaware existed as part of the coordinated raid that took place in numerous locations at once. They discovered proof of a 3-continent money laundering scheme, offshore account details, and decades worth of fake documents. Over $50 million is the preliminary estimate of the whole scam. However, that wasn't even the most fulfilling aspect. Do you recall the pictures James had saved for insurance? As it happens, he wasn't the only one who kept records. 3 of his ex-girlfriends came forward with pictures, emails, and text conversations dating back years. They had been silently constructing their own case and were all aware of one another. The finest aspect. For months they had been collaborating with the FBI. James's recent business travels were watched, and every transaction was recorded. As one might anticipate, my mother's response to the arrest was quite predictable. She made an effort to play the victim by saying she was unaware of their illicit actions. When the FBI disclosed that they had recordings of her actively engaging in money laundering through her charitable foundation, that story completely collapsed. All those lavish galas she held to raise money. Simple plots to wash up shady finances. There has been extensive media coverage. The story was carried by all local news channels and even by several national ones. Prominent businessmen and son-in-law arrested in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. The headlines continued to appear. Overnight, my father's meticulously cultivated reputation as a community leader and benefactor was destroyed. The reaction from their social circle was fast and harsh. Those who once admired them at charity functions now act as though they had never met them. Their church requested that they resign from all committees, and the country club canceled their membership. In an effort to protect their own reputations, former business partners are going out of their way to assist the authorities. James's business quickly distanced itself from the situation. He was fired right away, and they are completely assisting with the investigation. As it seems, he had also been defrauding them by inflating contracts and keeping the difference for himself. His name has become poisonous in the sector, and his professional reputation has been utterly wrecked. What the forensic accountants at the FBI discovered made me laugh aloud. Grandpa left that property in the trust in Florida. It was more than simply a dilapidated house. It held the secret to their whole scheme. Grandpa had purchased it especially to serve as evidence after learning that it was being used as a front for money laundering. He was aware that the property inquiry would reveal everything if they attempted to challenge the will. Even from the afterlife, he played them like a chess master. James and my father both agreed to plea bargains last week. The punishment is severe. My father will serve 15 years in federal prison, James will serve 12 years, and all assets related to their crimes will be forfeited. For the remainder of their lives, they will both be making restitution. Next month, my mother will be sentenced to 8 to 10 years in prison for her involvement in the money laundering conspiracy. After all of this, Emily is stronger than ever. She started her own business with the settlement, which was the little money left over after asset forfeiture, once the divorce was finalized. We've never been closer since she moved into a comfortable apartment close to Grandma's house. Our parents worked very hard to sever the sister link, but it has since become indestructible. There was more karma to come. Do you recall how my parents attempted to ruin my reputation in the workplace? The board of my organization was so pleased with my handling of the matter that they elevated me to the position of Director of Security Operations. I now oversee a group of people that work to stop the exact type of scam that James and my father perpetrated. Last month, Michael relocated here, and we recently purchased a home a few blocks away from Grandma. By the way, she's doing fantastically. She used her experience to help others by starting a support group for families impacted by financial fraud. What about the valuable social standing of my mother? When I last heard from her, her old pals were openly avoiding her while she was shopping at the bargain grocery store. Her friends have made it apparent that she is no longer welcome in their group, and her expensive jewelry and clothing have all been confiscated. According to Reddit, justice isn't always served without flawless karma. Despite going through a lot, my family has emerged stronger, closer, and wiser. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who helped me along the way. And to everyone who has experienced similar betrayals in their family, never give up. When the truth finally surfaces, it's a magnificent moment. Parents used my wedding fund for my twins' lavish celebration. So I finally cut them off, but now they're back needing my help. I, 28F, must explain everything here. I've had this rivalry with my twin sister Emily for as long as I can remember. In my case, it wasn't just between us, but I suppose that's normal for siblings. Without even recognizing it, my parents were deliberately pressuring us into it. I was just there, And they've always treated Emily like she's something unique. I'll tell you why this occurred. Emily is precisely 12 minutes my senior. You heard correctly, 12 minutes. It seems that's all it takes to be my family's golden child. Emily was their miracle baby, the one who could do no wrong, from the day we were born. I wasn't a horrible kid or anything, but she always received the credit for whatever I did. My first recollection of this partiality dates back to kindergarten. Both of us participated in the school play. I played the main part in Little Red Riding Hood and Emily got 2 lines as a flower. Emily started crying on stage during the concert after forgetting her lines. My parents missed my entire performance as they hurried to console her right away. Later that evening, they didn't even recognize my accomplishment. All they could speak about was Emily's bravery for trying. For the duration of primary school, this pattern persisted. Emily would be told, "Oh honey, you tried your best," if she received a C on an exam, but I would hardly be acknowledged if I received consecutive A's. I recall working on a science fair project about renewable energy for weeks in 4th grade. I conducted research, constructed models, and even spoke with regional environmental specialists. When I handed my parents the blue ribbon for winning first place, they hardly gave it a glance. Emily had a difficult day during volleyball practice, but that's still wonderful. Can we discuss this at a later time? After that, I stopped showing them my honors. The worst thing was that they made no effort to conceal their partiality. My dad used to make jokes at family get-togethers about how Emily was their firstborn and, despite the fact that we are twins, those 12 minutes somehow made her the older sister. "Emily is our responsible one. She looks after her younger sister," he would remark. I was standing there, listening to them reduce me to Emily's shadow and nothing more. Things started to have a significant psychological impact on me in middle school. I became quite driven to prove myself. I joined as many clubs as I could, including the student council, the debate team, and the math club. I was motivated to excel at everything, so I studied late into the night. Emily, on the other hand, coasted through, doing very little but somehow receiving more attention and recognition. One particular incident in particular sticks out. I was selected to compete in the state-level mathematics competition on behalf of our school in the 8th grade. I prepared for months, frequently studying until 2 or 3 in the morning. Emily had a recreational soccer match on the same day as the competition. In addition to not showing up to help, my parents didn't even inquire about how I was doing. All they could speak about when I brought home the trophy for second place was how Emily needed to be cheered up because her team had lost their game. With greater stakes, high school was more of the same. I was still participating in as many extracurricular activities as I could, taking all of my AP classes, and keeping my GPA at 4.0. Emily spent much of her time at parties and barely kept up a C average. She was still the fun and social one though, and I was criticized for being too competitive and serious. The discrepancy was brought to light during our senior year. Because of my academic accomplishments, I was named valedictorian, accepted on a full scholarship to a top university, and even had an article in the local newspaper. Emily enrolled at community college after barely graduating. However, my parents bemoaned Emily's failure to get into her first choice school for the whole of our graduation celebration, which was meant to be for the 2 of us. In their address, they made no mention of my accomplishments. The pivotal moment occurred while attending college. I continued to keep perfect grades while working part-time to support myself while attending a prestigious institution to study computer science. I would return home from every break with the hope that something had changed and that perhaps my parents had begun to see my value. Instead, it was Emily this, and Emily that. Somehow her decision to leave community college after just 1 semester was interpreted as a sign that she was brave enough to follow her own path. Then, in my junior year, came Thanksgiving break. Everything changed when my uncle, who had always had a slightly excessive love for alcohol, made a mistake. He disclosed that my parents hadn't even intended to have twins while he was thinking back on my mom's pregnancy. They were devastated to learn they were expecting 2 children when they had only intended to have 1. My dad, being the docile person he is, simply shrugged and said, "We'll figure it out." My mom had been concerned about how they would manage 2 babies. However, their method of figuring it out was to basically choose a favorite and focus all of their energy on her, which was, of course, Emily, their cherished firstborn. In their minds, those pivotal 12 minutes were the difference. After years of wondering why they didn't care about my accomplishments, everything suddenly fell into perspective when my uncle confessed this to me when we were seated at the dinner table. It all made perfect sense. I was the afterthought and the unexpected addition, not the child they had hoped for. Something in me altered after that realization. I gave up trying to please them. I put all of my attention into creating my own life instead. I gave my all to my coursework and internships, wanting to succeed for myself, Not for them. I received several job offers from prestigious tech businesses by the time I graduated. I took a job at a promising startup as a software engineer, and after 3 years, I was promoted to senior developer. Emily, meanwhile, was organizing this lavish wedding after meeting a wealthy man at a pub and having a brief flirtation. Naturally, my folks were ecstatic. They couldn't even recall the name of the company I worked for, yet they spent hours on the phone with her talking about the specifics of the wedding. My company was getting ready for an initial public offering, IPO, and my stock options were worth more than Emily's fiancé made in a year. The irony was that I was actually doing very well. They never inquired about my professional background. It was the wedding fund situation that ultimately crushed my heart. The only one who had ever treated us fairly was our grandmother. She left each of us a sizable sum of money before she died, especially for our upcoming weddings. She had been very explicit that we were to share the money evenly. She told me in private that she was aware of my parents' treatment of me and that this was her method of making sure I would have something that was exclusively mine. Naturally, though, my parents were unable to honor her last desires. Emily wanted this ridiculously lavish wedding, complete with a celebrity photographer, a fancy outfit, and several locations. They chose to take from my share of the inheritance rather than urging her to cut back or asking her wealthy fiancé to contribute more. They didn't even tell me. They didn't ask. It wasn't until months after the wedding that my inebriated uncle, yes, the same one, spoke about it at another family get-together. They responded angrily when I confronted them about it. "Oh honey," my mother remarked, dismissively waving her hand, "we were going to tell you eventually. When we can, we'll reimburse you." Even worse was my father's reply. "Well, Emily needed it more. She's the conventional one getting married, and since you're so preoccupied with your work, it's unlikely that you'll even desire a lavish wedding." I felt nothing as I stood in their kitchen staring at these folks who were meant to be my parents. This deep emptiness, without any sadness or rage. They were unable to even comprehend the wrongness of what they had done. They believed that since it was for Emily, it was totally acceptable to take my inheritance without my consent. Emily had always been the focus. I returned to my flat that evening and gave my life a lot of thought. I came to see that Emily had eclipsed or completely disregarded every significant turning point, accomplishment, and proud moment. My graduation from high school. They were too preoccupied in comforting Emily over her grades. Due to Emily's difficulties at community college, my college scholarship was hardly recognized. Emily was preparing for her wedding, so she disregarded my first promotion. I did something I should have done years ago when I opened my laptop. I emailed them and said, "I am aware of the wedding fund. I am aware that, without consulting me, you used my inheritance to pay for Emily's wedding. The way you've treated me throughout my life is more important than the money. You never made an effort to conceal the reality that I was never the daughter you desired. I'm done attempting to win your affection and acceptance. I'm over being the kid you didn't want. Do not get in touch with me again unless it is to repay my money, please." I felt a tremendous weight lift off my shoulders as I pushed send, banned their numbers, and deleted them from all social media. I didn't have to worry about trying to meet Emily's standards or gaining acceptance that I would never receive for the first time in my life. It has been a life-changing year. I gave my job and personal development my all attention. My stock options are now worth more than Emily's whole wedding expenses because our company's initial public offering, IPO, was a success. I started therapy to address my childhood trauma, purchased my own home in a desirable area of the city, and formed sincere friendships with individuals who genuinely respect me for who I am. Occasionally, Emily makes an effort to connect with distant family members or mutual friends. She will write things like, "Family should stick together," or "You're still my sister." But as she saw our parents discount my accomplishments throughout the years, where was this sense of family? When she joyfully received my inheritance for her wedding, where was that? She shared our parents' complicity in everything. Some relatives have attempted to place the blame on me by claiming that I'm being too severe, that blood is thicker than water, and other such things. However, these are the same individuals who silently observed my parents' years-long favoritism of Emily. They remained silent after seeing my treatment. They are no longer able to express an opinion. It's interesting because cutting them off has made me realize who my true family is. My therapist, who is helping me see that none of this was my fault. My coworkers, who applaud my accomplishments, and my college best friend, who assisted me in moving into my new home. The ones that genuinely care about me are these. I have been offered a role as team lead at the firm I work for, which recently launched a new office in a different state. I'm making a decision for the first time in my life without considering how it will compare to Emily or what my parents will say, and it's a great opportunity. It feels amazing to be living my life for myself. Am I the jerk for cutting them off entirely? Reddit? I often question whether I'm being overly dramatic, but every time I consider the possibility of getting back in touch with them, I reflect back on all the years I spent feeling inadequate, and I know I made the correct decision. It's going to get even more complicated now, though, and I need your honest thoughts on what I should do next. Update 1. 2 weeks ago, everything changed drastically. My phone began ringing with several calls from my uncle when I was in the middle of a team meeting. My initial reaction was to ignore it because family calls always indicate turmoil, but I decided to answer it because there was something unique about receiving several calls in quick succession. He began, trembling a little. "Hey, it's Uncle Greg." I knew right away that something was amiss. He is typically the type of guy that remains positive even in the face of adversity. "I need to discuss your parents with you." I felt sick to my stomach. I knew this couldn't be good news because I hadn't heard from them in 2 years. "What's happening?" Trying to speak steadily, I asked. "They were involved in an accident. A rather poor one. They are in the medical facility." He paused, and I heard him inhaling deeply. "Their car was struck by a truck that ran a red light. Your dad is in critical condition, and your mom has several fractures. They have spent a few days in the hospital." Days. I said it again, raising my voice. "And until now, no one had the idea to tell me." He said, "They wanted me to let you know," in a calmer tone. "I believe, they want to see you, I believe. That's not all though. Their insurance is having issues." There was, of course. He went on to tell me that 6 months prior, my parents had allowed their health insurance to lapse. They had been having financial difficulties due to credit card debt and poor investments. They were far from being discharged from the hospital, and the medical bills were already mounting. "What about Emily?" I knew the answer when I asked. Uncle Greg let out a sigh. "She said she couldn't assist with the bills when she visited once, immediately following the accident. She didn't want to ask her husband for money so soon after their honeymoon, for some reason. She is occupied with her stepchildren, her new family." That made me giggle. Emily is typical, always coming up with an excuse. Emily was too proud to approach her wealthy husband for assistance with our parents' medical expenditures, even though she had no trouble taking my fortune for her wedding. I sat in my office for a while after I hung up with Uncle Greg, gazing out the window at the skyline of the city. I didn't miss the irony. Now that my stock options had vested and I had more than enough money saved to pay for their medical expenses, I was truly in a position to assist them. Did I want to, though? I was unable to concentrate on anything else for the following few days. I jumped every time my phone buzzed, anticipating a call regarding their status. I couldn't stop picturing them in hospital beds, presumably wondering if I would ever arrive. Since they were my parents, I felt bad for even thinking about not helping. The years of favoritism, the stolen fortune, and the way they only contacted me now because they required something from me were all brought back to me though. Simply put, this was about money. Not about re-establishing contact or making amends. 3 days after Uncle Greg called, Emily texted me. "I am aware that you are performing well at work. Parents are in dire need of assistance. This is your opportunity to act morally." My opportunity to act morally? When she was using my inheritance to pay for her wedding, where was this moral compass? Where had she been all those years when she saw our parents brush off my accomplishments? My parents finally called themselves after a week of internal conflict. Although my mother's speech was weak and obviously influenced by painkillers, her deceptive methods remained same. As if the past 2 years of silence hadn't occurred, she began, "Sweetheart, we're in a really tough situation here. According to the specialists, the expenses might reach $200,000, not including rehabilitation. We acknowledge our shortcomings as parents, but..." I interrupted her. "No, you aren't, and you never will be. You haven't gotten in touch with me in 2 years, and the only reason is that you need money." My dad's voice said, "That's not fair." He was probably on speaker. "Your parents are us. Family supports family." That statement, "family helps family," set me off. Anger that had been bottled up for years came to the surface. "Family helps family." I said it again. When you used my inheritance to pay for Emily's wedding, where was that feeling? When you missed my college graduation, where were you? Where did you neglect every significant event in my life because you were too preoccupied with showing your admiration for Emily? After a brief period of silence, my mother began to cry. Those recognizable, cunning tears I had heard so many times when she wanted to make me feel bad. She said, "How can you be so cruel? The hospital is where we are. Your dad may require surgery. Will you truly desert us at this point? I inhaled deeply before uttering the words I had been wishing to say for years. Yes, in fact. Yes, I am. All my life you emotionally abandoned me. You just thought of me as Emily's shadow and your fallback option. Now that Emily is refusing to assist, you turn to me. No, I will no longer be your last option. Starting with, but we're family, my father said. No, I cut in. We're not. Since you determined that Emily was the only child deserving of your love, we have not been family. I'm finished. Never get in touch with me again. After hanging up, I blocked their numbers once more. I then texted Emily one last time, saying, they're also your parents. Try it yourself. The days that followed were extremely difficult. I would always have these moments where I would doubt my choice. Was I being too severe? Despite all, should I still assist them? But every time those thoughts surfaced, I was reminded of how they had treated me throughout my life and how they had only ever contacted me when they wanted something. Yesterday, Uncle Greg gave another call. He attempted to guilt trip me by claiming that my parents required physical therapy and surgery since their health was deteriorating. He said they might lose everything and that they were discussing remortgaging their home. The problem is that I have no responsibility for their financial difficulties. They made their decisions. They decided to give Emily preference. They decided to squander the money I left them. They decided to allow their insurance to expire. They are currently dealing with the fallout from their decisions. Some may accuse me of being heartless. Perhaps I am. But I've been striving to be good enough and win their love my entire life, and I'm done. I am no longer the fallback option. When Emily refuses to take charge, I'm done being the one who has to make all the repairs. For the first time in my life, I'm choosing myself, even though I realize this makes me seem callous. My mental well-being is more important to me than their guilt trips. My financial stability is more important to me than their shoddy preparation. Reddit. I know I previously questioned whether I was the jerk for cutting them off, but I need to know if I'm the jerk for not helping them pay their medical costs. This one even seems unclear to my therapist. While I feel bad about it, I also think that this is just another instance of them only wanting me around when they need me. And believe me, the narrative doesn't end here. The situation is going to become considerably more intricate. Update 2. My life took yet another drastic change 3 days ago. I was enjoying a peaceful evening at home after a very demanding workday during which we had completed preparations for the opening of our new office. My doorbell rang at precisely 8:07 p.m. when I was studying some project paperwork, enjoying a glass of pricey red wine, a minor luxury I now permit myself, and some classical music playing softly in the background. I hadn't ordered anything and most of my friends normally text before coming over, so I wasn't expecting anyone. I froze, staring through the peephole. Emily was standing there looking like the affluent trophy wife she had become, complete with a fashionable gown, flawless makeup, and a $15,000 Hermes Birkin purse in her hand. I was aware of the irony. That bag alone could have paid for a sizable amount of our parents' medical expenses. I briefly thought about acting as though I wasn't home, but throughout the previous few weeks, I had undergone a transformation. I was no longer the person who squirmed around Emily. She had intimidated me for too long, and I had allowed her to win. No more. I opened the door with my cool, controlled and slightly dismissive corporate boardroom demeanor. Leaning against the doorframe, I remarked, "Well, if it isn't my dear sister. What brings you to my humble abode?" Without waiting for an invitation, she swept by me and entered my apartment. Emily's usual behavior. Her gaze swept across my living area, taking in the original artwork on the walls, the contemporary furnishings, and the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlook the city. I could picture her mentally listing everything, most likely contrasting it with her suburban McMansion. She said, "Nice place," in a tone that suggested the exact opposite. Very cozy. She used the word cozy with that special emphasis that affluent people give to something they think is beneath them. "Stop wasting your time, Emily. Why have you come here?" She turned to me, adjusting her scarf, an anxious habit from childhood. "Mom and Dad are deteriorating. Mom's physical treatment isn't covered by their payment plan, and Dad needs emergency surgery for internal bleeding they missed at first. Unless they can provide proof of payment, the hospital threatens to suspend treatment. They are discussing selling the house." I saw her knuckles whiten as she gripped her fancy purse more tightly. Emily in her classic form. She was clearly preparing for something. And that's my problem because... I arched an eyebrow, purposefully imitating her patronizing tone from our early years. "Because you can help them," she said, her immaculate exterior beginning to falter. "I am aware that your business went public. I checked the pricing of the stocks. I conducted research. You've got the cash." That made me giggle. The sound, which was perhaps rougher than I intended, reverberated off the walls of my flat. "Oh, you have been monitoring me? How intriguing. Before using my inheritance to pay for your wedding, did you do this much research? Or prior to your own refusal to assist them? In all this, where is your wealthy husband?" Emily's face turned red, another vivid memory from my early years. Her dramatic outbursts, which always ended with our parents comforting her, were always preceded by that flush when we were little. "That's different," she stammered as her poise continued to falter. "I now have a new family. I have obligations. Consider stepchildren. We each have our own financial plans, James and I. When a family situation arises, I can't just throw money at it." "Can't just what?" With a strong voice, I interrupted her. "Can't you simply assist your parents, who have given you everything? Who paid for your wedding with my inheritance? Who prioritizes you the most? Who didn't attend my college graduation to assist you with your apartment move? Those parents." She waved her hand dismissively and said, "That's ancient history." But I saw that she stepped back. "This is roughly right now. You're being selfish, and they need help." Her use of the word selfish was the last straw. A lifetime of repressed rage and bitterness abruptly solidified into a chilly, unambiguous goal. I went silently to my home office, picked up my laptop and a few papers off my desk, and then went back to the living room. "Emily, would you like to discuss money? Let's have a conversation." I rotated the screen of my portfolio dashboard in her direction. "Look at these figures. My stock options are these. I'll explain it to you in words you can comprehend. This is more valuable than James, your husband, will be in 3 years. That home of which you're so proud. If I wanted to, I could pay cash for it tomorrow." As she gazed at the numbers, her face turned white instead of crimson. I went on, bringing up papers such as my investment portfolio, my pay stubs, and the most recent offers I had gotten from rival businesses. But you're a tech worker." For the first time I could recall, she stumbled, "You're just a programmer." Her voice was small. "Emily, I'm now a senior development director. I was making something for myself while you and your wealthy husband were playing home. I also did it without treading on anyone else, unlike you." I clicked firmly to shut down my laptop. Without using any of my resources, I could assist Mom and Dad by covering their medical expenses. "However, I won't." She murmured, "You're being cruel." But I could see that she realized that her younger sister had outwitted her. "No, it is terrible to stand by and do nothing while your sister is ignored her entire life. Without asking, cruel is stealing her inheritance. Cruel only shows up at her door when you're in need." I approached the door and pulled it open. "Are we finished here? Don't return?" Clutching her pricey purse like a shield, she stood there. She made one final attempt to say, "You'll regret this," but her voice lacked the assurance it usually possessed. "When they lose everything. My only regret is that I didn't cut you all off sooner. Emily, goodbye." I poured myself another glass of wine after she left, a $200 bottle I had been putting away for a special occasion, and this one felt like it, and then I went out to my balcony. In front of me, the city lights were a tapestry of freedom and opportunity. I felt totally free for the first time in my life. No more living in Emily's shadow, no more feeling guilty, no more looking for approval. My phone was inundated with notifications the following morning. Apparently, Emily had spent the night phoning every member of the family she could get through to tell them how I had changed, how prosperity had made me callous and uncaring, and how I was leaving the family when they needed me most. Uncle Greg wrote me a very long mail on karma and family responsibilities. In response, I shared a comprehensive folder with the family group chat. It included scanned copies of my inheritance documents, bank statements that revealed how my money was used for Emily's wedding, text messages from Emily stating that she would not assist with the medical bills despite her affluent lifestyle, and a breakdown of my current net worth that showed exactly how much I could contribute if I so desired. After that, the family conversation became very silent. Our cousin Angela was the only one to reply, "Holy, you actually did it, didn't you? In fact, you were successful on your own." I worked on my future plans over the course of the following few days. In another state, I accepted the promotion, which came with a bigger package of stock options and a substantial rise. The real estate agent believes my apartment will sell for a lot more than I'm asking for in this neighborhood, so I put it up for sale. I've already begun searching for real estate in my new city. This time, perhaps a penthouse. Emily sent me one last text last night, which said, "Mom's crying every night because of you." I commented, "She had years to cry about how she treated me," and included a screenshot of my inheritance paperwork in my response. Her tears are no longer effective. After that, I blocked her number and all of my other family contacts. Closing the last chapter of a book I should have finished years ago was how it felt. You have been amazing during this journey, Reddit. Your encouragement made it clear to me that I wasn't alone in my feelings and that it's acceptable to put oneself above harmful family members. Your remarks served as a constant reminder of my decision-making process whenever I had second thoughts. Recently, I received a message questioning if achieving financial success was worth sacrificing my family. The truth is, though, that I didn't lose any. Folks who never treated me like family in the first place were folks I broke free from. My achievement just gave me the courage to refuse their treatment. It didn't change who I am. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who told me similar stories, gave me advice, or just confirmed how I felt. When I most needed strength, you gave it to me. I will begin looking for a home in my new city next week. A new life, a new career, and a new home. For the first time, I'm looking forward to the future without being constrained by obligations to my family. Aida. To some, perhaps. However, I've come to the crucial realization that sometimes being branded an asshole by toxic individuals is a sign that you're finally advocating for yourself. Reddit, thank you. I was able to discover my value and voice thanks to you. My family treated me unfairly, favoring my twin. In the end, she used lies and manipulation to steal my fiancé. Life has a tendency of catching you off guard, don't you think? I, 35F, never imagined that I would be here, sharing my heart on Reddit at the age of 35. The idea that my fiancé, the man I believed I would spend the rest of my life with, married my estranged twin sister after just a week of getting to know her, still baffles me. What brought me here? Everything's a lengthy and agonizing tale, but I must let everything out. I suppose I ought to begin at the beginning. To put it mildly, my twin sister and I have had a complex family dynamic for as long as I can remember. My sister was obviously the star child from a young age. You would assume that parents would treat twins equally, wouldn't they? False. In our family, my sister always came first and I came second. When we were young, it began with modest things. My sister always had the first choice when our parents bought us clothes or toys. She would always make the first choice, leaving me with anything she didn't like, even if the products were identical but different in color. I would be lectured about selfishness, how the gifts were the same anyway, and how acting entitled would make me never get far in life if I ever objected. The preference increased in intensity as we aged. I'll admit that I resented my sister for enjoying the attention and pampering. We were never close, and as we started middle school, our distance from one another only grew. She began hanging out with the cool kids, and distanced herself from our group of friends. I could at least have my buddies to myself and find some quiet at school, so in a way this was better for me. The distance between my sister and I continued to widen throughout middle and high school. By the time we graduated, our social networks and areas of interest had entirely changed. Because I would be interacting with her less, this worked for me. Although she continued to be cruel, particularly at school when she tried to appear cool to her peers, I had grown accustomed to her conduct by that point and was not particularly bothered by it. Things between us became so bad at the conclusion of high school that there was no turning back. I knew exactly what I wanted to accomplish with my life, so I put a lot of effort into my college applications. In addition, I wanted to stay up with my pals, who were all striving for top schools. Since I wasn't interested in finding out, I never inquired about my sister's essay preparation. However, for someone who wasn't ready or didn't seem to know what she wanted to do, she exuded far too much confidence in her admissions. I was devastated to learn that she was accepted to my ideal school, but I was not. Even though I was sad, I felt uneasy. I discovered, just in time, that she had stolen my work and turned it in as her own after doing some research. I was enraged. As usual, my parents would have told me to suck it up and that nothing could be done now, so I didn't want to inform them. I had had enough of being polite and being trampled. I made the decision to go nuclear. I sent the university an email outlining her plagiarism and proving that the material was actually mine. Additionally, I informed them of the circumstances at home and asked that they use caution when responding to her. They did, however, reply and put her on a blacklist after discovering that she had plagiarized during the application process. She sat stunned when she received the email and gave me such a hateful look that I thought I would pass out. However, she was unable to tell her parents anything. That she stole my essay. What could she have said? I was more than happy that she was finally receiving the credit she deserved, even though I knew I had put her in a difficult situation. I'll confess that it was stressful and, to me at least, a little funny. She was aware of my actions and I was aware of hers. She was unable to go because it would require her to acknowledge that she had stolen my work, and I didn't want to go to my parents for a resolution. Unfortunately for her, this injustice devastated her parents. They insisted that there was no plagiarism involved, and were resolved to bring it up with the university. It became messy at this point. When my parents emailed the institution, they received a thorough response regarding her application and the work, my work, from which she had stolen. I mistakenly thought that after they witnessed what their beloved daughter had done to me, they would finally accept her for who she truly was, and perhaps, just possibly, I would start to play a significant role in the family. The exact reverse was what took place. I spent days being scolded for intentionally destroying my sister's life and profession. They chose someone to harass as soon as they discovered that I was the one who had reported the plagiarism. She stole my work, but that didn't matter. The fact that she was at fault didn't matter. The fact that she prevented me from attending my ideal school didn't matter. The fact that I had exposed her without their knowledge was all that mattered. They called me all kinds of names and stated that talking to them about it would have been the right thing to do, after which they would have come up with a solution. I informed them that letting her leave without any consequences would have been their only option, and I would have been told to accept it and apply somewhere else. My home was a wreck and nobody wanted to hear my side of the story. It was now obvious that I would always be the fall guy and that my sister would never be held accountable for anything she did. I was just waiting for college, but the following few months were terrible. I knew that as soon as I left the house, I would never return. In any case, there was nothing to return to, so I did just that. I instantly stopped communicating with my sister and my parents after leaving for college. After her little incident, she was dead to me, and I had no intention of ever seeing her again. Going to college was a welcome adjustment. I worked hard, had a good life and made good friends. Determining to succeed on my own without assistance from my family, I immersed myself into my studies and extracurricular activities. I met around this period, and we remained friends for a few years. We had the same group of friends, even though he was my senior in college. He asked me to be his girlfriend just before he graduated, and I accepted. Since he was one of my best friends and I enjoyed spending time with him, I thought a relationship would be the natural next step. He informed me that he had been crushing on me for years and had been trying to have the guts to ask me out until I said yes. Sincerely, I thought this was cute and informed him that even if he had asked me sooner, I would have said yes. For what it's worth, our connection was good. We knew each other well because we were already close friends. A certain amount of ease and candor was present and it just happened. I also told him about my family's whole predicament. I clarified that nothing could ever force me to speak to my sister again and that I had very little contact with either of my parents. I requested that he honor that. His family is picture perfect, therefore he found it ridiculous that a family could be so dysfunctional. He is the eldest of 4 siblings, all of whom are supportive and close, and his parents are deeply in love. He has never experienced my ordeal. I liked and appreciated the familial dynamic he came from, and I respected that. The affection they had for one another was really sweet. I couldn't help but feel a little envious because I had never had it. But because he couldn't imagine dysfunctional families, I made it plain to him that he should never expect me to return to my family and attempt to make things right. I trusted him since he appeared fine with it. I had no idea that this would turn out to be my worst life decision. I concentrated on developing my career after college. I was resolved to show myself, and if I'm being completely honest, my family, that I could be successful without their help or connections. I put myself into my work and worked my way up the corporate ladder. I had a prosperous marketing career, a great downtown apartment and a circle of close friends who had become my adopted family by the time I was in my early 30s. We both decided to take things slowly, but and I kept dating. Neither of us felt the need to rush into marriage because we were both focused on our careers. I felt like I had at last found someone who understood and supported me, and the arrangement was comfortable. Proposed to me 2 years ago when I was 33. Yes, of course, I said. By that point we had been dating for about 8 years, and I was certain that he was the man I wanted to live my entire life with. His family welcomed me with wide arms when he first introduced me to them. Even though it wasn't biological, I felt like I had a family at last. I formed separate ties with each of his siblings, who were very hospitable, 2 sisters and 1 brother. Even before I married him, I felt like I was a member of the family. The next natural step was marriage, and I was quite content with my life and my relationship. Planning for the wedding, honeymoon, and other details took up the whole year prior to our planned wedding last year. It was a difficult period for our relationship as well as stressful since I recognized then that we had differences and that it would take work to overcome them. Nevertheless, we voluntarily persevered. While deciding on the guest list, we got into one of our most heated arguments. He wanted to invite a large number of people, including his immediate relatives, some uncles, aunts, his siblings' partners, and others. But I wanted a small, private wedding? However, I didn't have any family members I wanted to invite. I informed him that I genuinely didn't want my family near me on my wedding day and that I would only be inviting my friends. He initially agreed, but I could tell he was hesitant. When I asked him if there was an issue, he said that there wasn't, so I dropped it. Nevertheless, he approached me a week later and advised me to invite my family since there would be no wedding without a family present. I gave him a wide-eyed look and informed him that I had always made it plain that my family was not involved in my life. There was no reason to be upset about my parents' absence because they were unaware that I was engaged and that the bride and groom were the only two guests required for a wedding. He refused to give up. He said that any arguments I had with them could be put aside for a single day and that his intention was only to invite them to the wedding, not to establish a romantic relationship or extend forgiveness. Any invitation, I informed him, would imply that I wanted to patch things up, and I didn't want to do that. I should have left him there. Looking back, I could tell that he had chosen to hurl this at me even though he claimed to understand my reality and my upbringing, which I had always been open about. But in love, I was a fool. I nearly stopped talking to him after our many arguments, but I knew deep down that we had to come to an agreement. He finally explained to me why he insisted on inviting my family after much back and forth. He claimed that he didn't want his relatives to believe that he was getting married to a woman who didn't get along well with her family. He believed that my parents' absence would reflect negatively on his family, which is highly traditional and has always lived by the family first motto. That was not what he wanted for me. I initially believed his way of thinking to be considerate and caring, but I soon came to see how flawed it was. Since his parents and siblings already knew that I didn't get along with mine, he was more concerned about the impression his family would get, particularly his extended family, than he was about the psychological effects on me. I should have seen that the show was more important to him than his wife. I paid the price for not doing so. I finally decided to phone my folks after much back and forth, but there was where I crossed the boundary. I informed him that while I would have them there, my sister and no other family members would be present. My family would not be permitted to speak, and there would be no father-daughter dance. He had to put himself in my shoes, and that was the only need for inviting them. Fortunately, he consented, and he was aware that he had little other option. Additionally, I cautioned him against reaching out to people on his own. I would only call and extend an invitation when I thought the time was appropriate. I knew they would make something up and convince my sister to go if I told them too soon, and I couldn't agree to that. To be honest, I also hoped that they might not be able to make it if I told them too late. In this manner, even though I would be technically correct, I would still get my way. I believe M had a suspicion, but even if he had, he remained silent. So that was that. 6 weeks before the wedding, I told my parents, and they assured me that the whole family will undoubtedly be present to support me on this wonderful day. I interrupted them immediately and informed them that my sister would not be attending my wedding in any way. I would take them out myself if they attempted to be cunning and brought her anyhow, even if just the two of them were invited. They attempted to object, claiming that it was the ideal moment for the family to get back together, that I should stop being a baby, that I had gotten my revenge, and that I should be content. Before the wedding, I informed them that this was the only way I would be contacting them. They were aware of the location and the time, and they could attend if they so desired. But I wouldn't think twice about taking the required action if they tried anything. I hung up the phone after that. I was completely mistaken to believe that was a strong enough warning to stop them from making any plans. I should have anticipated that my sister would show up there and cause chaos. She did create a mess, but it was far more extensive than I had anticipated. I need to get this off my chest. Yet as I sit here typing this, I can feel the hurt and rage rising within me once more. What happened next was a betrayal so profound and agonizing that it rocked the foundations of the life I had worked so hard to create, and I needed to tell someone, anyone, what happened next. In my upcoming update, I'll continue this. I need some time to gather my thoughts because writing it all at once hurts too much. I appreciate you reading this far. I had no idea that I would be telling my tale in this way, but here we are. I would be grateful to hear your opinions and advice. Right now, I feel completely lost. Update 1. A week has passed since my last post, and I'm still in shock about everything that transpired. We appreciate all of your encouraging messages and remarks. I never thought that strangers on the internet would be so generous. Where did I leave off then? Yes, the dreaded family invitation and the wedding planning. In case you're not convinced, things have gotten worse. My parents came into town via plane the week before the wedding. They asked if M and I could meet at their hotel so they could give me something. M persuaded me to go despite my reservations, suggesting that it might be a peace offering. He assured me that he would accompany me and that we would depart as soon as difficulty appeared. I felt sick to my stomach when we got to the motel. I sensed a problem as soon as we entered their room. My twin sister was seated on the bed, grinning smugly, and there she was. Just a few days before my wedding, my parents had ambushed us in the hopes of forcing a family reunion. I went cold. The old emotions of hurt, betrayal, and rage returned with a vengeance. M put his hand on my back when he could tell I was upset, but it didn't help much. With her arms extended as though the past 15 years of separation didn't matter, my mother took a stand. "We thought it was time to move on from the past," she remarked, her voice brimming with fake tenderness. "Your sister wants to talk to you about something." My sister got up and began what seemed like a prepared statement before I could respond. "I apologize for what happened with the college application, and I know I hurt you," she started. "I've regretted that ever since I was foolish and young." I gave a sour laugh. "Young and dim-witted? We weren't 8, we were 18. You were fully aware of what you were doing." My father added in a firm tone, "Now, let's avoid bringing up previous points of contention. As a family, we are here to move forward." I looked to M, expecting him to support me and remind them of our wedding deal, but he was silent and had a serious look on his face. I trembled as I murmured, "May we go now?" After he paused, he said something that completely shocked me. "Perhaps we ought to listen to them. After all, they are trying." I turned and left the room without saying another word. Trying to make sense of what had happened, I headed to the hotel bar and ordered a heavy drink. Hours went by. My phone was vibrating, and I chose to ignore the never-ending barrage of missed calls and messages. When I eventually returned to our flat, it was already midnight. M was pacing the living room while she waited to wake up. Hours passed while we argued. M insisted that I should at least attempt to make amends because family was vital. How he could be so oblivious to the suffering they had inflicted upon me was beyond me. We were clearly at a standstill as the night went on. "I need some time," I responded at last. "I'll be spending a few days with a friend. I must think." The days that followed were a haze. I ignored me and my family's calls and texts and stayed with my best pal. I needed time to reflect and determine my true desires. The more I considered it, the more I saw how deeply M's actions had damaged my faith in him. I eventually consented to meet with M 3 days prior to the wedding. A calm cafe where we had gone on our first date years prior served as a neutral setting for our meeting. I didn't miss the irony. M appeared awful. He appeared to have aged years in a matter of days, and there were dark circles under his eyes. I was still angry and hurt, but I also felt bad for putting him through this. He started, "I'm sorry," as soon as I took a seat. "I ought not to have pressured you to make amends with your relatives. I was mistaken." Hours passed while we recapped past exchanges and upsetting experiences. Ultimately, we reached a decision that felt necessary but shattered my heart. M whispered, "I think we need to postpone the wedding. We clearly have some issues we need to work through." With a mixture of relief and regret, I nodded. "I think that's for the best." We came away from the cafe with a rough plan. We would separate for a month, avoid communication, and give our desires some serious thought. We would then get together once more to determine whether to proceed with the wedding or, well, we didn't want to consider the other option. I began making calls the following day. I informed our vendors that the wedding would have to be postponed indefinitely. Although we lost some deposits, most were understanding. I communicated with our visitors by sending out a general email outlining the circumstances in ambiguous language. Then there was quiet. Like an unending desert, the month without communication stretched out in front of me. To distract myself from the uncertainties of my relationship, I immersed myself into my work and picked up new interests. I initially incessantly checked my phone, half hoping, partly expecting to find a message from M. However, I noticed that I was checking less and less as the days stretched into weeks. During our connection, I began to rediscover aspects of myself that I had previously allowed to slip away. I started painting again, got back in touch with old acquaintances, and even went to the beach for a weekend by myself. I experienced a mixture of dread and excitement as the month's end drew near. Another part of me, which was getting stronger every day, questioned if perhaps this separation was for the best, but I still wanted to see him again to see if we could salvage what we had. I received a call from an unknown number the day before our scheduled meeting. I heard a voice I hadn't heard in years when I responded. The shaky voice of my sister. "Please, don't get married to Emu." Suddenly, my world began to shift on its axis once more. However, that is a tale for a future update. I apologize for leaving you waiting, but I need time to think about what transpired next. I appreciate everyone listening and helping me get through this nightmare. I will return soon with additional details about the story. Update 2. My previous update was almost 11 months ago. I'm sorry for the extended silence, but I needed time to take it all in. I appreciate your support and patience, everyone. My estranged sister had just given me a startling phone call urging me not to marry M when I left off. From there, however, things only became more difficult. I met M the following day as scheduled after that enigmatic call. I knew something was seriously wrong the moment I laid eyes on him. He had black circles under his eyes and appeared gaunt. I was about to respond when he suddenly exclaimed, "I made a terrible mistake." My heart fell. My world was shattered by his next statement. With his voice hardly audible above a whisper, he admitted, I married your sister." I briefly believed I had misheard him. How was it possible for him to wed my sister? Only a month has passed since our separation. I experienced a wave of nausea as the reality set in. M then told me an absurd story that sounded like the storyline of a poorly written soap opera. My family apparently persuaded M to listen to them after I left that day. They told him stories about my early years, portraying my sister as the victim and myself as the troublemaker. What's the worst? He took them at face value. I felt offended and bewildered. Your family seemed so sincere, and I thought maybe I didn't have the full picture. M attempted to clarify. I made a foolish choice. My sister and parents had hatched a complex scheme. To avoid being made fun of by his family, they proposed that M wed my sister for the ceremony. After the commotion subsided, they could have the marriage dissolved or divorced. Despite the absurdity of the proposition, M had somehow consented while he was confused and being manipulated. Stunned into stillness, I sat. I was so deeply and profoundly betrayed that I was at a loss for words to describe how angry and heartbroken I was. I got up at last. "I never want to see you again," I stated in a remarkably composed tone. "You, my sister, my parents. You're all dead to me now." The weeks that followed were a jumble of suffering, rage, and incredulity. Unable to face the world, I took a leave of absence from my job. Despite the support of my friends, I was distraught. During this depressing time, M's mother called me out of the blue. Something compelled me to answer the phone even though I didn't want to at first. "Please," she said in a tearful voice. "I must see you. You must be aware of something." I agreed to meet her against my better judgment. At a little park close to my place, we first met. Her eyes were red from sobbing, and she looked terrible. She disclosed the whole scope of what had happened. M had been duped by my family, who had played on his fears and fed him tales about my background. They had persuaded him that I was unstable and that I had fabricated tales about my family in the past. But why would he believe them over me? Still having trouble understanding, I asked. Tragically, she shook her head. He had a susceptible condition. Your relatives took advantage of the fact that your abrupt departure had unsettled him. She clarified that M's family had opposed the hurried union with my sister. Despite their attempts to dissuade him, M had carried out the plan while in a confused and manipulated state. "And now?" I inquired, fearing the response. "Your sister won't get a divorce from him. By threatening to demand a large amount of alimony if he attempts to leave her, she has been dragging the marriage along." However, the disclosures did not end there. She informed me that my sister had told them the truth about everything a few days prior while intoxicated. She acknowledged that all they had told him about me was false and that they had trapped him. She even came clean about the essay that had been taken all those years ago. Her words, "M has been devastated since then. He'd like to speak with you. He claims that he made the most significant error of his life and is unsure of how he would ever be able to apologize. Perhaps you can speak and decide what to do next, he hopes." With my head spinning from all this new knowledge, I gazed at her. I felt somewhat vindicated because the truth had finally surfaced. However, a greater portion of me was just worn out. "Well," I answered in a stern tone. "Thank you for sharing all of this with me, but M and I are no longer a we." He decided. Regardless of their marital status, he is now my sister's husband. I refused to interfere or assist him in getting out of this situation. When I said this, she sobbed and begged me to change my mind, but I refused. Telling her, "My decision is final. I've moved on from that phase of my life. I'm unable to reopen those wounds." She texted me several times over the course of the following few days, urging me to speak with M, but I didn't reply. All of this was too much for me to handle anymore. I thought a lot about everything that had happened, including the life I had nearly committed to, the man I thought I knew who had deceived me so profoundly, and the family that had never really welcomed me. And I came to the crucial realization that I was stronger than everything. At that moment, I decided to use my experience as a springboard rather than a setback. I had been granted another opportunity to live my life as I had always desired, free from the burdens of my past. With fresh energy, I pushed myself back into my work. In order to resolve my trust difficulties and the residual pain from my family's betrayal, I began therapy. I became closer to my pals and was even more grateful for the family I had chosen for myself. And what do you know? Things improved. It wasn't always easy, and on some days I felt like the hurt and rage would get the better of me, but I gradually began to recover. I can state with confidence that I'm in a better place than I've ever been after 10 months. I've taken up new interests, gotten promoted at work, and even resumed dating, albeit informally and much more cautiously. Ever since that day in the park with M's mother, I haven't heard from M or my family. I'm thankful they're no longer in my life, but occasionally I wonder what happened to them. They are responsible for the repercussions of their own acts. I want all of you out there who may be experiencing anything similar to know that things get better. You are stronger than you realize, even though it may not feel like it right now. Never allow a friend, family member, or romantic partner to make you feel less valuable than you actually are. Once again, I want to thank everyone for their support along this trip. This is going to be my last update on the matter. This chapter of my life is coming to an end, and I'm looking forward to many more joyful ones. Cheers to fresh starts, selected families, and the inner strength we discover when we need it most. Revealing my brother's darkest secrets sparked an explosive Mother's Day confrontation, leading my family to cut ties with him. Years of repressed feelings and unresolved tensions exploded over the Mother's Day breakfast. For the sake of peace, our family continued to strive to maintain civility even though my brother Sam had always treated me badly. I was usually the silent one, wanting to be his buddy in spite of everything, and forgiving him for things I shouldn't have. For a long time I let him treat me whatever he pleased since I had no idea what a true sibling relationship should feel like when I was growing up. I've matured emotionally over the years and currently reside with my parents. I became resentful of Sam after realizing how poorly he had treated me, and I eventually stopped talking to him. Mother's Day followed. Sam and his fiancée Leah joined us for brunch. I went to help my mom even though I had a migraine because I was afraid Sam would abruptly cancel, as he frequently does. His only remarks were patronizing, but I hardly spoke to him. We went outdoors after lunch, and the heat was making my migraine worse. When I asked Sam to go, he became irate and told me that no one had requested me to come in the first place. The anxiety increased even after my mother swiftly defended me. I finally had enough. After years of frustration, I turned around and faced him. Sam had already acknowledged that he wasn't pleased with Leah, claiming that she made him miserable, but he was scared of being by himself, I reminded him. I practically reminded him of how he had wounded me. He once grabbed me by the neck and held me against a wall until I passed out when I attempted to stop him from driving while intoxicated. He has never shown regret for that night, the PTSD it created, or the grief he inflicted. Even the fact that he didn't come see me in the hospital following my injury or during my 3-month recuperation at home was disregarded by him. It was quite painful. His defense was feeble when he did reply. He asserted that my college residence was funded by our parents, as though that in some way excused his actions. They also covered him, I reminded him. Puffing up his chest, avoiding responsibility and challenging anyone to challenge him were all hallmarks of Sam. I made it plain that he was not a member of my family at that point and instructed him not to get in touch with me ever again. As they conversed, my dad gently led me back to the car. I had said everything I needed to say, so I didn't listen. My mom cut off Leah's attempt to clarify that Sam had denied me permission to stay with them due to their 2 enormous dogs. I never intended to bring my own dog Pebbles, but Sam had lied and said I did. Sam vowed that as long as I was around, he would never return to the house. Mom promptly put an end to my brother Sam's recent attempt to have my parents expel me. She said that it's entirely his fault and that I'm far higher on the family hierarchy than he is. Mom was first conflicted. As a mother, it was difficult for her to think about severing Sam's relationship even though she knew he was totally at fault. However, Mom acknowledged that she was incensed when I detailed all the horrible things he had done to me and other family members. Assuming that sibling arguments were common and that I was always the one who was fine, she even expressed regret for not disciplining him more when we were younger. Sam refused, saying he wasn't ready to deal with her yet, even though she texted him that an apology would be greatly appreciated. My parents informed me that they would not go to Sam's wedding if I was not invited. They desired that he be held accountable for his deeds. To be honest, the idea behind the wedding is that I wouldn't attend even if I were invited. I revealed to Mom that Sam had actually embezzled almost $800 from Dad over the years, which was more than we initially believed. I also disclosed that he had harmed me physically and mentally by having sex in both my parents' and my beds. Despite all, Sam's success at work is solely due to Dad's efforts, and on Father's Day, he was unable to send a text. He became upset when Mom reminded him, saying it ruined his day. That really got us going. We became aware of how badly Sam had fouled things up as we vented. Both Sam and Leah, his fiancée, don't have many friends. She is angry that their grandmother won't give Leah's child all of her attention, so she doesn't talk to either her mother or her sister. Given that I enjoy organizing things, they most likely expected me to assist in planning their wedding, baby shower and other events. Now that Sam would make me dog sit without my consent, I don't know who will assist her. Years ago, Leah made offensive remarks regarding babysitting, saying that Mom wouldn't want strangers watching her kids. This further strained her relationship with her mother. They probably thought I would act as the compassionate sister and offer assistance, but that isn't the case. Sam used to treat me like his therapist, but he didn't show any sympathy after my 14-year-old dog died. In the meantime, he revealed that he is afraid for the day she passes away since he wouldn't know what to do with one of his senior dogs. Well, he is no longer able to rely on me. Now that Leah is aware of Sam's actual feelings for her, I assume the engagement is tense. Leah is slowly coming to the realization that Sam has also lied to her about me. To be honest, I have no idea or interest in how it is going for them. Both of them are blocked. We even wager that Sam believes I'll give in and get him a present for his birthday without him having to say sorry. He will be rudely awakened. Dad was outraged and said, "I can't even trust my own family," after learning how much money Sam had stolen. For me, that was the tipping moment. I used to be amenable to apologizing and mending our friendship, but I'm done now. When Leah showed us the sonogram, I felt sick to my stomach. With the hope that Sam would change his mind, my family and I had dreaded the day when he would be married and have a child. In particular, Leah struggles to care for herself. Unfortunately, they both damaged their relationships with everyone who could have been of assistance to them. In light of everything that has transpired, my mom and I made an effort to make Dad's birthday last week extra special. Every year, Dad's place of employment hosts a family appreciation day at a nearby amusement park. Sam also works there, but unless we go together, he normally doesn't pay attention to these activities. On his birthday, Sam surprisingly texted Dad to ask if they wanted to do something over the weekend. Dad said Sam would see him closer to the date because he had been working on projects and was taking a week off around his birthday. Sam texted once again on Friday as the weekend drew near, wondering if they might get together. Dad had a little shift on Sunday, and Saturday was the day for family appreciation. Dad didn't want to go alone, so he told Sam they were busy, even though my mom had informed him he could go without her if he so desired. Even if they had been free, I sincerely hoped they wouldn't consent to meet him, so I was relieved when Mom told me about it. "Maybe we'll get back to him about his birthday around Christmas," Mom joked after reassuring me. Even though he lives only 10 minutes away, Sam is notoriously awful at commemorating occasions and providing gifts, and he frequently sends cards much after the customary time. For example, what did he anticipate happening? "After everything, I needed that laugh." As an aside, a commenter brought up the fact that Sam's chokehold was truly a felony, that is, the strangulation of a kid. I was struck with that realization. I never really thought it was a crime because I was so accustomed to his physical outbursts. On that one, he totally avoided the repercussions. Although I believe that too much time has gone, I still want to see whether there is anything I can do legally about it. In any case, hearing about the text conversation with Sam made me chuckle and helped to diffuse the tension. "If Sam is ready to deal with me yet?" a humorous commenter inquired. The irony is that he most likely isn't aware that Saturday was actually scheduled. Since he and Dad share a workplace, Dad might easily learn about Sam's schedule, including that Sunday duty. In any case, Sam will believe that my parents are ignoring him on my behalf and come to the realization that they are not forgiving of him so easily. He might genuinely comprehend the repercussions for the first time. Recently, I had another unsettling thought. What does Sam's violent conduct signify for my future niece or nephew if it hasn't changed? Even after 15 years, the trauma still affects me. Sam has a history of losing control under pressure, getting lethargic, and drinking more. I'm also concerned for their child because Leah can hardly take care of herself. Sam probably wants me to be sympathetic and take on the role of caregiver. But even if I wanted to, I honestly don't know if I could handle that legally. Given how much time has gone by, anxiety makes me question whether the authorities would even consider me seriously. We showed up unannounced, which actually means we came twice a year, both times when we had car issues nearby as Leah has complained about. Her family, meanwhile, frequently visits without any problems. Leah isn't very important to any of us anyway. Not knowing if our dad would survive, she once pulled Sam and me from his hospital bed so we could go to her mom's weekly dinner. She used it as a weapon when Sam actually yelled at her on the way back, accusing him of not giving a damn about her family. Mom finally threw Sam out after he failed to discipline his dog after it hurt her, asking him to get his act together. Although I know my parents truly love me, I find it frustrating that they haven't held him accountable in the past. They were fostering children at the time to help pay for Sam's education tuition and to make ends meet, so they would have lost their license if they had reported him. By that point, Sam was only home during breaks, and fortunately, there were no other children there. Regarding childcare, I no longer have any sympathy for Sam or Leah. Before allowing them to abuse their child, or, worse, if Sam ever throws his child on me without asking, I would contact CPS. I no longer consider them family. Let's move on to the next family matter, my brother's wedding. Because of his controlling mother-in-law, there were no children. At this point, Leo, my kid, won't interact with him in any way. My family has always been close-knit and has supported me in raising Leo. I am a 46-year-old single father. Leo's favorite person in the past was my brother Jack. Because Jack and Mary had flexible work hours when Leo was younger, they frequently took him to the zoo, aquarium, or even camping. As my son got older, he began to share my brother's passions for video games, photography, and music. Leo informed me he wanted to follow in his uncle's footsteps when he was 9 years old. All of this is to suggest that they were very close. My brother told me last year that he and Mary, his girlfriend, were getting married. When I questioned Jack and his girlfriend about it, they told me it was all Karen's idea, my stepsister's mother, because I knew they didn't think marriage was a good idea. Karen was paying for the wedding, so Jack and Mary didn't give a damn, so they let her organize everything, including the location, the food, the music, etc. Karen made the decision to organize a destination wedding in an upscale hotel. Last July my son and I received the invitation that was sent to us both. If I so desired, I even had a +1. I attempted to book our hotel stay as soon as the wedding website launched. Since the link wasn't working and I didn't want to take the chance of not getting a room, I had to call the hotel. The confirmation email stated room for 2 adults, but I didn't give it much thought because I thought the hotel personnel were having trouble communicating in English. At about the same time, I also purchased our airline tickets. Less than a month before the wedding, in January, my stepsister called me in tears. Karen had chosen the wrong location. It turns out that the resort was exclusively for adults and that children were not permitted. At the time, my kid was 13. They informed me that the entire resort was child-free, so Leo wouldn't even be permitted to attend the ceremony or reception when I asked if we might stay at another hotel. Disappointed, I promised my stepsister that I would discuss it with my kid. She insisted that she and Jack wanted to tell him face to face, even though I knew how thrilled he was about his uncle's wedding. To be honest, my son was heartbroken. When he was informed that he would not be allowed to go, he broke down in tears. He begged them to move the wedding and even offered to donate all of his savings. After half an hour, my brother became irate and told Leo that the day wasn't about him and that he was being self-centered. After a while, Leo apologized and retired to his room. My son ceased communicating with my brother after the wedding. Leo would disregard any messages Jack sent him unless they were important to me. For instance, he couldn't get through to me, so he would only respond if Jack asked him to tell me something. Leo would answer simple queries at family get-togethers, such as "Can you pass the salt?" or "Help grandma with the plates," but he would turn away from Jack and Mary if they attempted to strike up a conversation or inquire about school. To make up for the wedding, Jack and Mary promised to treat Leo to a memorable spring break getaway a month after the wedding. After turning down the invitation, my son informed me that he didn't want to accompany them. I knew he had always wanted to go there, so it was devastating, but he refused to back down. Leo had a similar incident on his birthday. After I told him that I was going to throw him a party, he urged me not to invite his aunt and uncle. He claimed that if they didn't want him on their special day, he didn't want them on his. I attempted to persuade him by reminding him that they were family and that they were sincerely sorry. When I informed my brother that he was not invited, he was devastated. But this past weekend at my mom's place, things reached a breaking point. The topic of Leo's plans for college came up. Leo told my mother that he was no longer interested in going to the same university as Jack and that he had decided to pursue another course of study. "Why would I want to be like your uncle?" my son said in response to my mother's statement that "I thought you wanted to be like your uncle." I stepped in and informed Leo that although he didn't need to be so impolite, the harm had already been done. After hearing what he had to say, my brother and stepsister quickly fled. My brother texted me last night to call me a jerk for letting Leo harbor resentment. He even implied that I wasn't doing anything to improve their connection by accusing me of being envious of it. I explained to him that these were the results of his behavior and that he was solely responsible for letting his future mother-in-law organize the wedding when she obviously didn't take my child into account. He ended the call. My mother and some relatives believe that in order for us to all move on, I should make my kid forgive my brother, saying that it was only a small error and that there was no malice. However, I don't believe I ought to. My kid was obviously harmed, and he should only be given the opportunity to move past his hurt and forgive them when he is ready. Recent update. For a while, we will be avoiding family gatherings. My brother promised to accept Leo's boundaries after we spoke. In addition, he clarified the actual events, and most importantly, Leo is currently doing considerably better. Here is a longer update for those who are interested. I told my mother that until things calmed down and, more importantly, until Leo felt at ease again, we would no longer be going to family events. I believe she finally realized how much Leo had been hurting, even if she was rightfully upset. My mother surprised me by telling me that she was adamant that Leo forgive Jack since he had fallen into a depression. I clarified that pressuring Leo to forgive could end in driving him farther away. When I informed my sister that we would no longer be attending family events, she expressed sadness as well, but she claimed to understand. To ensure that the kids could still spend time together, she recommended that we establish our own weekly ritual. For the past few weeks, that's what we've been doing. Leo spends time at her place one week, then my nieces and nephews visit me the next. Leo seems content with this arrangement and it appears to be working so far. The fact that he is not under parental pressure to engage with his uncle, in my opinion, is beneficial. I texted my brother the weekend after my post, requesting a meeting and conversation. Mary wasn't there because I told him I wanted to talk to him alone. Jack instantly expressed regret for his actions and words, expressing his regret for both. He supported my presumption that his frequent arguments with Mary had caused him worry. He also said that the arguments had gotten so heated that he had thought about getting a divorce. I may come out as harsh, but I informed him that I only wanted the truth about what had happened and didn't care about that. According to Jack, he was unaware of the child-free location until November. But Mary had known for a long time, perhaps all of it, as many of you suspected. It seems that this all began when Jack and Mary took Leo to the beach a few years ago. My son unintentionally called Jack Dad when they were playing, but he swiftly corrected himself. According to Jack, it was a minor, innocuous error, similar to when a toddler unintentionally addresses a teacher as mom. Leo felt ashamed, but Jack dismissed it with a laugh. The problem was that Leo had been overheard by Jack's stepmother, Karen, and her husband Phil, who had accompanied them on that trip. Karen lost out when they got back from their vacation, saying she was triggered by a random kid calling Jack Dad, especially since she knew Mary couldn't have kids. Karen became very poisonous and aggressive toward Mary, demanding, among other things, that Leo not be welcomed over when she visited, despite Mary's attempts to clarify that it was only a misunderstanding. At first, Jack and Mary only intended to elope without a celebration when they made the decision to get married. However, Mary was tricked by Karen into allowing her to organize the ideal wedding for her only daughter. Mary gave in because she wanted to maintain harmony and was worn out after years of emotional manipulation. Karen deliberately selected the child-free location and took control of the wedding preparations. Mary found out after the place was reserved, but Karen played the victim when she attempted to protest. According to Mary, she tried to work out a deal with the resort, requesting an exception so the kids could stay at a separate hotel and yet attend the ceremony and reception, but the manager was adamant about the rules. Mary became more and more nervous as the wedding date drew near, and in November she told Jack the truth. My brother claims that Mary's emotional outburst was caused by her mother's persistent bullying and manipulation. And she felt terrible for allowing things to come to this point. Jack informed me that rather than excluding Leo and my sister's kids from the wedding, he would have intervened and called it off if he had known sooner. Canceling was not an option though, as many individuals had already reserved their hotel rooms and flights by that point. Ultimately, I informed my brother that none of this justified their actions, particularly Mary's. A woman in her 40s was arguing with a child. When all Leo wanted to do was offer the $2,000 he had saved so he could attend Jack's special day, she screamed at him and called him selfish. I told Jack that he had disappointed Leo, who admired him and thought of him as a hero. Jack had demonstrated to Leo that Jack valued him more than he did. I also informed him that I would be going low contact myself and that I would continue to support Leo's decision to stop communicating with him. I told Jack that he had already apologized enough when he begged for another chance to apologize to Leo. He had no choice except to wait and see if my kid would ever accept his apology. Despite his seeming sadness, Jack assured me that he would honor our requests and give us some space and time. Regarding my son, I expressed regret for not advocating for him earlier and for making him attend weekly family meetings. I informed him that he was free to choose how he wanted to manage that aspect of the family in the future. Although he was hesitant to stop going, I assured him that I would always be there for him and that I wouldn't be offended by his choice. Leo recommended that we spend more time together, just the two of us, rather than attending weekly family events, which pleased me. He suggested that we partake in some of the things he and my brother used to do. We attended a vintage car exhibition last week, and we're going to see Wicked the following week. It sounds like fun, but I'm not a theatrical person. I also expressed my concern that he had stopped doing the activities he loved and advised him not to give them up because he had a disagreement with a loved one. I clarified that he may still enjoy things alone or with a companion. He acknowledged that he had stopped doing such things out of spite for Jack, even though he truly wanted to. I chose to buy him some games that he had been looking forward to but had refunded following the altercation with my brother as an early Christmas present. Using his PC and my PS5, he even persuaded me to play one of his Final Fantasy games online. Since the last Final Fantasy the game I played was still in 2D. I'll admit that I have no idea what I'm doing, but he seems to like seeing me fail. We would appreciate any advice you may have. For my birthday, we ultimately agreed to travel to his ideal location. I was a little depressed that I wouldn't be celebrating my brother's birthday for the first time in nearly 50 years, but all that matters is that I had my son. Leo is less anxious and happier as a result of family matters. In relation to family, it appears that they are at last honoring our limits, which is a relief. All I can hope for is that my brother can improve his marriage. Even though I don't like what they did, I do want him to be content. My parents always favored my adopted sister, even pushing me to combine my store opening with her graduation. This time, I got my revenge. I'm a 24-year-old male who grew up in what appeared to be a normal suburban middle-class family, but my parents' actions have caused me chronic suffering all of my life. Their entire reputation in our neighborhood was based on the fact that they were these wonderful people who, in all honesty, loved their adoptive daughter even more than their biological son. Few people are fully aware of the impact this had on me. My adoptive sister Emma, who was 3 at the time, was brought home by my parents when I was 6. Everything in my life changed on that day. I was ecstatic when my parents sat me down in our living room and discussed the possibility of adopting a sibling. Most afternoons I waited for my parents to get home from work by playing games in our backyard by myself. The children in the area were either much older or younger than me, and I had no siblings with whom to play. It seemed like the ideal answer to have a sister with whom I could share my toys and hang out during those long days. It was just what I had hoped for when Emma initially came. During those peaceful afternoons at home, we played together, had snacks, and I at last had someone to chat to. But over time, little shifts in my family's dynamics continued to accumulate. Emma became the center of my parents' attention, and they made all of their decisions with her best interests in mind. If Emma wasn't in the mood, they would postpone weekend family activities, modify dinner arrangements to suit her tastes and rearrange their schedules so that they could attend all of Emma's school functions while missing mine. I began to feel marginalized in my own household, as if my parents were losing interest in me. There is more to this narrative than just sibling rivalry, even though I am aware that some may assume I am just jealous. There was a noticeable difference between Emma's and my parents' approaches to childcare. My mom quit her 8-year accounting job to become a full-time mother within a week after Emma's arrival. In contrast to when I was born, Mom returned to work as soon as her maternity leave ended, putting me in the care of different people. I spent most of my time at my grandparents' little apartment or with whatever teenage babysitter they could afford that month because my parents were constantly worried about money back then and worked extra and weekend shifts. The babysitting situation was anything from perfect. Instead of truly watching me, these sitters, who were mostly high school students looking for additional money, often saw their position as an opportunity to hang out with their partners. As they sat in the living room, texting or chatting on their phones, I would spend hours by myself in my room. Sometimes, when they thought I was sleeping, their boyfriends would sneak in through the garage or climb through our rear window. My parents would terminate the present sitter after I repeatedly told them about these instances, then hire a new one who behaved similarly. During years, this cycle persisted, and I felt that no one genuinely cared about my welfare during the majority of my early years. I believed that everything would improve when Emma arrived. I took my responsibilities as a big brother seriously, even though I was only 6. I gave her access to all of my toys and even assisted her in learning the letters, as much as a 6-year-old could. It was good to have my mom at home all the time. I believed we would finally be able to do everything I saw other children doing with their mothers, such as going to the park or baking cookies. Rather, as the big brother, my mom expected me to be mature and self-sufficient while spending all of her time and energy on Emma, treating her like a princess. When my parents changed the plans for my birthday, things really started to get tricky. Emma's true birth date was unknown to the orphanage and she had been discovered abandoned at a shopping mall. After conducting a number of tests, including dental work, developmental evaluations, and physical examinations, the doctors determined that she was around 3 years old at the time of her discovery. My parents decided that Emma should share my birthday rather than keeping the date she was given at the orphanage or picking any other day of the year. They portrayed this concept as though it were a unique privilege for me. I began to notice small differences every year, but those early combined birthday celebrations were tolerable. Even though I continued to get gifts and eat some cake, Emma started to dominate the gatherings. Family, friends, and relatives would show up with twice as many presents for her, gushing about how wonderful it was that we celebrated together and hardly seeing me. Emma's backstory appeared to captivate everyone, who treated her more like a queen than a mere child. As everyone gathered around Emma to listen to her recount the same adoption tale they had heard dozens of times before, I sat there, silently opening my gifts, trying not to feel invisible at my own birthday celebration. I still find it annoying that my parents had Emma share my birthday. She was already officially given a date by the orphanage, the day she was discovered. We could have chosen any day that may have been Emma's special day, such as my aunt's birthday in September or my grandparents' anniversary in March. However, my parents purposely picked my birth date because they thought it would help Emma feel more a part of the family. The one special day of the year when they are the focus of attention for the majority of children is their birthday. However, my parents used this innocent youthful delight as just another reminder that Emma's needs came first. They concluded this choice with sentimental platitudes about sharing and family ties, which prevented a 6-year-old from expressing dissatisfaction without feeling self-centered. The only person who appeared to realize something was off was my uncle. During that first joint party, he drew me away to ask if I truly felt comfortable with everything. By the time I was 10, I no longer celebrated birthdays but loathed them. Emma was in charge of every step of our combined celebrations, from picking princess themes that made me feel uncomfortable at my own party to selecting a cake that I didn't even enjoy. The issue with the guest list was especially unfair because I was only allowed to invite 5 of my friends, but Emma would bring 20 or more from her different activities to our home. Because of this rule, I had to pick my friends carefully every year, which occasionally strained my bonds with those who were unable to go. After I was unable to invite my best buddy to my 11th birthday, we stopped communicating for weeks. When I wanted to invite a 6th buddy one year, the inequity of these parties became even more apparent. My parents denied the request right away, claiming that our home could already host as many people as possible. Emma's pals and their mothers, who needed to supervise their daughters at all times, were able to find space nonetheless. My parents used their go-to justification that girls require extra supervision to brush off my worries when I brought up the fact that my pals arrived alone. Emma's friends and their mothers, meanwhile, occupied our entire living room and treated me like a guest at what should have been my birthday. On multiple occasions, I plucked up the nerve to propose holding separate parties. Every time I tried, my parents would cut me off with prepared answers about Emma's challenging past. They would bring up her terrible beginning in life for the 100th time, utterly disregarding the fact that they were making a difficult present for me by consistently denying my feelings, or they would tell me that she didn't know her true birthday, as if that somehow justified taking over mine. I always felt bad about bringing up the topic in these chats, as if I were being selfish for wanting a day to myself. I eventually gave up arguing over my birthday. In what had become Emma's special day, featuring her brother, I learned to put on a smile and play my part. The pain persisted. It simply became a recurring emotion on each birthday. Emma unwrapped twice as many presents than I did during these parties, and I would sit silently in the corner and try to look joyful while family members swooned over her and hardly acknowledged me. Finding my passion for making things with my hands was the one silver lining in all of this. Making a pencil holder out of an empty cereal box one dull afternoon was the beginning. Before long, I was turning a variety of everyday objects into works of art. Bins of gathered materials, such as broken jewelry, plastic bottles, and old newspapers, anything I could repurpose, filled our garage, which became my go-to spot. I watched do-it-yourself videos for hours on end, learning new ways to make everything from elaborate jewelry to gorgeous wall hangings. My works, which were solely mine and which Emma was unable to share or take over, gradually filled my room. By my early 20s, what began as a therapeutic pastime in my teens had developed into a lucrative internet business. I worked a day job at a local coffee shop and spent many hours improving product images, writing descriptions, and running my online store. Social media users began taking notice of my handcrafted goods, and soon I had loyal clients from all across the nation. With cabinets brimming with supplies, and a special shipping station in what should have been my dining room, my tiny apartment was transformed into a workshop. My funds ultimately allowed me to create my own physical store after 3 years of meticulous financial planning, working overtime, and reinvesting nearly every penny of earnings. I discovered the ideal location, a former boutique with exposed brick walls and lots of windows in a bustling shopping area. 2 months ago I signed the lease, and in my free time, I designed exhibits, planned the store layout, and planned a grand opening event. This was meant to be my chance to shine, to prove to everyone that the boy who sat in the corner on his birthdays had accomplished something meaningful. I even engaged a local photographer to capture the entire occasion. My folks reacted in a predictable way when I told them about the store opening. After 5 minutes or so of their seeming excitement, my mother revealed that Emma was graduating from college at the same time. They suggested that we combine the opening party with Emma's graduation celebration before I had even finished outlining my preparations. My dad nodded as though this was the most sensible notion ever, and my mom remarked, "Think about it, we can invite everyone once instead of making them come to 2 separate events." The irony of attempting to combine my milestone with Emma's once more went unnoticed by them. I declined right away, stating that I wanted my accomplishment to be the main focus of this celebration. When I resisted, my parents seemed surprised, as if they didn't understand why I wouldn't want to share this moment with them. Using their tried and true guilt-tripping strategies of making things easy for everyone, they persisted in pressuring me, accusing me of being selfish and challenging. They used the same expressions they had used when I was a child. "It's only one day, and why can't you be more understanding?" But this time was different. I had worked alone for years to establish this business, staying up late to fulfill orders, interacting with challenging clients, and learning every aspect of business management by making mistakes. I firmly said that this event would exclusively be about the debut of my store. They were no longer successful in making me feel bad. My parents became irate and said they might not attend the opening at all when they saw that I wasn't going to back down. I told them that was their decision for the first time in my life. I was left feeling bewildered and frustrated by the entire event. Instead of being proud and encouraging, they were attempting to minimize my achievement by making it about Emma once more. Here I was, their kid, accomplishing something important all by myself. They didn't think I deserved a celebration of my own, even though I was an adult with my own company. I was no longer a 6-year-old who could be persuaded to share his wonderful day, but the same patterns from my early years were reoccurring. Regardless of who came to celebrate, I made the decision that my store opening would be my time alone. Update 1. I got hundreds of answers after venting my unhappiness online, but one message in particular truly resonated with me. My parents had unwittingly given me the ideal opportunity for retaliation, someone pointed out. The more I considered it, the more obvious it became. A college graduation would inevitably be eclipsed by the opening of my business, especially when I could give everyone first dibs on my merchandise. Directly beneficial things always pique people's curiosity more. I agreed to my parents' proposal in a message rather than continuing to oppose the combined celebration. I informed them that I had changed my mind and that I believed they were correct to gather everyone for a single, large celebration. My parents were ecstatic at my seeming change of heart, likely believing that their guilt trips had won me over once more. I continued to be cooperative throughout all of the planning sessions, nodding in agreement as they talked about food possibilities and decoration ideas. As I had anticipated, my parents took full charge of organizing the celebration. They planned the catering, made arrangements with all of our family members and guests, and reserved a pricey location, all in keeping with Emma's graduation theme. Every choice, including the color scheme and the kind of music to be played, was created with Emma's preferences in mind. The invitation card served as the last piece of evidence that I had made the proper choice. The phrase "celebrating Emma's graduation" was printed across the top of these ornate, gold-bordered cards. Nowhere, not even in the small print at the bottom, was my store announcement mentioned. This was exactly what I had planned, but my parents undoubtedly believed I would be unhappy. Everyone in attendance would be completely taken aback by my revelation because they were all focused on Emma's accomplishment. During those weeks, I worked quietly to finish the details of my store debut and prepare my own contents. My parents had invited almost everyone, so the party location was just what you would anticipate. I couldn't have timed my announcement more perfectly. The bartender noticed me and gave me a fresh glass of champagne just after all the remarks but before the cake cutting. As I got up, everyone's eyes were on me, presumably anticipating another homage to Emma. While my parents were busy welcoming guests, I worked with the venue personnel to create my promotional materials earlier. I didn't need sentimental appeals or flowery wording. My declaration was direct. I just said that next month, after years of developing my online business, I will establish my first physical location. Groups gathered around me in a matter of minutes as people inquired about the store's location, the goods I would be carrying, and the exclusive deals I would be providing to friends and relatives. My aunt was now showing everyone photos of my products on her phone after she had just completed speaking about Emma's academic accomplishments. There was a noticeable difference between my parents' private and public responses. As family members congratulated me, they forced smiles and nodded in agreement, maintaining their typical flawless demeanor in front of the guests throughout the evening. However, I could sense the stress in their body language, my dad's jaw tightening whenever someone brought up my store, and my mom's hands trembling a little while she served cake. Emma disappeared from her own graduation celebration shortly after her champagne toast failed, and hardly anyone listened to her rehearsed speech about her time in college. My mom's facade eventually broke when the last relative left and the caterers started to clear up. The mom, who had taught me to share the spotlight for years, confronted me and accused me of spoiling her daughter's graduation celebration. Calmly, I stated my stance, stating that I had just announced my business as scheduled and that this joint celebration was their idea, not mine. My father's response demonstrated the extent of their partiality. He jumped right to blaming me of jealousy rather than admitting that they had been treated unfairly for years. I had seen this trend since I was a little child. Any attempt to assert my own space was viewed as selfish or envious. After 20 years of holding back, I finally said it. I detailed every celebration, birthday, and moment that had been appropriated and turned into Emma's unique time. For once, I was just expressing the facts about their behavior pattern and wasn't requesting sympathy or compassion. My parents resorted to their standard defensive tactic, making the same claims they had made all through my early years. They brought up Emma's terrible beginning, her desertion, and the fact that she didn't know her biological family, which made her need further help. These were the same excuses I'd heard at every family get-together, school function, and birthday where my needs had been neglected. However, I didn't feel bad about what they said this time. I had worked with my therapist for years to process these emotions, realizing that their actions were motivated by their desire to be viewed as saviors rather than Emma's needs. We were all unaware that Emma had come back to the location and was waiting in the doorway when we confronted her. Putting on the dramatic show that had always worked so well for her, she rushed into the room with mascara streaming down her face. She blamed me, saying that I was envious of her position in the family and had always detested her. In actuality, I had spent my early years attempting to be the ideal big brother, giving up my personal space and festivities, all the while being informed that it was never enough. Instead of being the recipient of our parents' unrelenting favoritism, she was now behaving as though she had been the target of my anger. The days after the celebration demonstrated how ingrained my parents' partiality was. They concentrated only on Emma's injured feelings, ignoring the ways in which their actions had exacerbated the problem. They contacted me over and over again, requesting not just an apology, but also that I pay for Emma's vacation so she could get over the stress. Their request was quite ridiculous. They wanted me to pay Emma thousands of dollars only because people were genuinely interested in my business success rather than Emma's graduation. They demanded that I give them my hard-earned money so they could pay for Emma's vacation after she felt overshadowed at one party. My answer to their demands was straightforward. I left. I was done playing their game after years of attempting to be understanding and accommodating. My parents appeared surprised that, unlike so many times in the past, I wouldn't give in and apologize right away. Their trump card had usually been Emma's tears, but they weren't working this time. Nothing would ever change, as evidenced by their inability to recognize the hypocrisy. Emma was furious over sharing attention at one occasion, but I had been forced to share or give up the spotlight at every celebration for 20 years. I had already attempted to discuss these matters with my family. I made several attempts to discuss my parents' partiality with them during my late teens and early 20s. I tried a variety of strategies, including polite conversations at family dinners, long emails outlining my emotions, and even suggested family therapy. The identical response was given to each attempt. Emma had a difficult start in life. This expression became their go-to justification for anything I said that hurt or irritated them. When I was 19, I sobbed as I talked about how lonely I felt at my own birthday parties during a particularly trying conversation. All my mother could do was remind me of Emma's desertion. I eventually came to terms with the fact that my parents couldn't see their own actions clearly after years of this habit. At the age of 21, I left their home and rented a modest apartment across town with the first earnings from my internet business. Our relationship has grown more surface level ever since. We occasionally visit one another at family get-togethers, send each other birthday greetings, and share significant life events, but there is no longer any genuine connection. No in-depth discussions or emotional exchanges. I've stopped expecting them to change or see things my way, but they still don't understand why I've separated myself and continue to blame me for not being more understanding of Emma's needs. Update 2. My parents surprised me with an even more absurd demand just when I thought they had had enough of the commotion surrounding the graduation party. They unexpectedly showed up at my flat prior to the big opening of my store. They sat uneasily on my couch at first, acting casual as they inquired about the store's preparations. However, they then disclosed their true motivation for coming. They wanted me to appoint Emma as the store manager. Their argument was that she shouldn't have to go through the typical job search process like everyone else because she had a college degree. They seemed to believe that I had a duty to give Emma a ready-made job because I had worked so hard to develop this company over the years. When my parents enumerated Emma's qualifications for running my store, the conversation swiftly turned bizarre. My dad claims that her primary qualifications were that she was pretty, smart, and had a general business degree, as if being physically attractive had anything to do with managing a retail establishment. I had studied customer service, inventory control, and company operations for years, but it seems that Emma's beauty outweighed all of that knowledge. My mom didn't hesitate to suggest that Emma should also cut the ribbon during the store opening when I mockingly inquired if they wanted me to do anything more for their precious daughter. What was she thinking? Emma might feel less important at the graduation celebration, but it would make up for it. They believed Emma deserved more publicity, therefore they wanted me to give a management position in my company to someone who had no retail expertise and allow her to serve as the face of my store opening. However, this was no longer about birthday celebrations or toy swapping. This was my source of income, my career accomplishment, and something I had created on my own without their assistance. They reacted to my rejection in the same way they had always done. By manipulating my emotions. The guilt trips came first, followed by charges of selfishness and threats. With the same firmness that she had used to make me share my birthdays, my mom offered them an ultimatum. Either I give Emma what she wanted, or they wouldn't come to the store opening. Emma's arrogant expression as they threatened me informed me that she expected me to comply, just as I always did. They were all startled when I instructed them not to come at all and agreed to their requirements instead. Even without my immediate family present, the store opening surpassed all of my expectations. The room was crowded with my extended family, devoted clients from my internet business, and encouraging friends. I told my family members the truth without feeling ashamed or sorry when they nervously inquired about my parents' absence. Some expressed sympathy, while others were uneasy, but I didn't care about controlling other people's emotions in relation to my family's circumstances. After opening for several months, my store is doing quite well. Expecting me to come apologizing like I had so many times before, my parents tried their customary silent treatment, but now their silence is peaceful instead of terrible. To fit their idea of the ideal family, I no longer feel the need to shrink myself. My parents forged medical records to force me into surrogacy for my sister. I refused, they called me selfish and pressured my family to push me. I never imagined that I would be writing this post, but following last week's events, I need a different viewpoint. My parents abruptly contacted me after 13 years of little communication, stating that they needed to talk about something significant. Greg, 43M, my husband, was concerned that something odd might be happening, but neither of us could have foreseen what would happen. Emily, 44F, my older sister, has always been the family's golden child. As a child, it was obvious that she was everything my parents could have ever hoped for. Intelligent, athletic, attractive, and seemingly flawless. She was frequently praised by them, who referred to her as their perfect princess or golden apple. 2 years after Emily's death, I was an unexpected surprise. In my parents' perspective, being unexpected wasn't my only sin. I was born prematurely and had a severe cardiac issue that had numerous operations and ongoing care during my early years. Even though my grandparents paid for the majority of the medical bills that insurance did not, my parents never let me forget how much of a financial burden I was. We could have taken that vacation if we didn't have all these medical bills. Or Emily's college fund would be bigger if we didn't have to deal with your hospital stays, are examples of the passive-aggressive remarks they would make. Their treatment of us was a sharp and terrible contrast. My accomplishments were hardly recognized, but Emily's little victories were honored with parties and gifts. In high school, I recall winning a writing contest at the state level. Emily had a regular soccer practice that day, so my parents were unable to attend the award ceremony. The everyday small things that truly brought home to them how different we were from them weren't simply the significant events either. Emily was well aware of her status as a golden kid and made the most of it. Knowing that our parents would never support me, she would frequently bully me. When I was 12, I was shoved down the stairs by her after I unintentionally touched her science project. For weeks, I had a huge bruise on my back. My mother's reaction? You should be more careful around Emily's things. That was it, just another reminder that I was less valuable than her possessions, with no care for my hurt or retribution for Emily. My only way out was to go to school, but even that was difficult. I struggled to stay up because I missed a lot of classes due to my health problems. While I was fighting to maintain mediocre grades in between medical stays, Emily was achieving straight A's and dominating in sports. The analogies persisted. Why aren't you more like Emily? Emily never struggles with her assignments. Emily doesn't cause us this much anxiety. I had figured out how to blend in as much as possible by the time I got to high school. That was simpler. Emily already had a ton of friends, was headed to a prominent institution, and was leading the ideal life my parents had always desired for their kids. In the meantime, all I was doing was surviving each day without feeling like a total failure. Going to college was the true turning point in my life. In order to move as far away from home as possible, I pleaded with my grandparents. They were the only ones who ever truly stood by me, and they understood, having seen the dynamic unfold for years. I selected a university that was several states away, and they assisted me with tuition and other costs. I met Greg when I was a college student. He was patient, compassionate, and truly interested in me as a person rather than as a weaker sibling, which set him apart from everyone else I had ever met. I felt appreciated and acknowledged for who I was for the first time in my life. After graduation, we were married and I believed that I could finally be able to achieve the family life I had always desired. Emily and my parents hardly noticed my wedding. They didn't send a card. They didn't come. I wasn't shocked, but it stung. I was embraced by Greg's family, and his mother even assisted me in choosing my wedding gown, something I had always dreamed of doing with my own mother. We made the decision to try for a child a few years into our marriage. Because of my cardiac condition, my doctors told me that getting pregnant would be quite dangerous, but we still wanted to try. The pregnancy was really challenging. Despite my many hospital stays and near-death experience during delivery, I barely survived and our son was born healthy. The physicians were very clear, I may die from another pregnancy. It was just too much for my heart to bear again. With our small family, Greg and I were happy. Away from my poisonous family, we had each other, our lovely boy, and a tranquil existence. My only communication with Emily and my parents was through sporadic phone calls and holiday cards. The separation was restorative. Then came last week. My parents contacted me, stating that they had an important conversation to have. I agreed to see them at their home against my better judgment. Greg accompanied me to provide assistance. They handed me an envelope and seated us down in their living room, the same space where they had repeatedly mocked and disregarded me during my early years. There was a letter inside, but it was a surrogacy agreement, not just any letter. Emily has been having infertility issues, so they wanted me to be her surrogate. They had already conferred with physicians and attorneys, prepared all the necessary documentation, and were presenting it to me as though it were final. As though I had no say in the matter. I was taken aback. They were aware of my cardiac condition. They were aware that I had almost passed away when giving birth to my own baby. They were aware that I could die from another pregnancy. However, they didn't care about all of it. They just cared about providing Emily with what she desired. My mother started crying as I attempted to explain that I was physically unable of doing it and that physicians had specifically advised against getting pregnant again. She cried, "How can you be so selfish? Emily has always wanted to be a mother. This is her only chance." My father added that after everything the family had done for me, I owed them something. What had they done for me? What specifically had they done to make me feel unworthy for the rest of my life? My grandparents paid the medical costs they loved to hang over my head. Greg and his family provided me with the emotional support I required. My parents' sole constant behavior was to tell me that I would never be good enough to be Emily. With my mother's charge of selfishness still echoing in my ears, I sobbed as I left their home. Greg was incensed not only at their request but also at the way they totally disregarded the possibility that I might die. He advises me to stop communicating with them as they have shown beyond a reasonable doubt that they are indifferent to my welfare. I know in my heart that he is correct. This suggestion is cruel in addition to being unkind. As usual, they want me to sacrifice my life and maybe leave my son motherless in order to give Emily what she wants. However, I also feel guilty about it. Perhaps I'm being self-centered. Perhaps I do owe them. Perhaps this is my opportunity to finally show them how valuable I am. Even though I am aware that these thoughts are harmful, they continue to race through my mind. Since that day, I have not returned any of their calls or messages. Emily has begun contacting me as well, with false statements like, family helps family, and, I would do this for you if the situation were reversed. Should it be a little bit out of her way, she wouldn't even offer to drive me to school. My son is on my mind all the time. If something were to happen to me while I was pregnant, he would be the one who would suffer the most. He needs his mother and is innocent in all of this family drama. How can they expect me to risk leaving my child an orphan in order to satisfy Emily's demands? Am I being self-centered? I've been told throughout my life that I'm bad for prioritizing my own needs. However, this is now about my son, my husband, and my life, not just about me. But I'm being tormented by guilt. I need a different viewpoint. Is it incorrect of me to decline to serve as my sister's surrogate? Should I put myself in danger to fulfill her desires? How can I handle the manipulation and guilt? Update 1. A week has passed since my last post, and things have gotten far worse than I anticipated. My family's calls and messages haven't stopped vibrating on my phone. Emily has been sending texts that manipulate emotions non-stop. This is my final opportunity to have my own child, and I've always wanted to be a mother. Remember how I always looked out for you when we were kids? She even dared to ask. That one almost made me laugh. She must remember our early years quite differently than I do. She sent a particularly nasty email yesterday, saying, Mom was right about you. You always thought about yourself. I suppose that almost dying while pregnant is merely a pretext for not assisting me. It was a powerful blow. Instead of treating my near-death experience as a valid medical issue, they are exploiting it as proof of my selfishness. Even worse are my parents. I'm ruining Emily's sole chance at happiness. Mom has been telling any relative who will listen over the phone. She is portraying me as this cold-blooded monster who refuses to assist her dying sister. However, Emily is not dying. She is simply unable to conceive naturally. They're behaving as though Emily's wish to have a biological kid is more significant than my actual risk of dying. This morning, Dad sent me a message that truly went too far. You've always been a letdown, but this is a new low. This is your way of repaying us for giving you life. By denying your sister the experience of being a mother. I wanted to reply that they didn't really give me life. My grandparents were the ones who covered the cost of the medical treatment that kept me alive, and they almost lost it due to carelessness several times when I was a toddler. Greg is enraged. I dissuaded him from driving to their house and confronting them. Even though I would have loved to watch him reprimand them, I informed him, they're not worth it. Rather, we engaged in a lengthy discussion about our future. Greg reminded me, this isn't just about you anymore. It has to do with our son. He might lose his mother as a result of what they're requesting. Nobody has the authority to force you to take that risk. Of course, he is correct. I feel no remorse for turning Emily down when I see our son. He needs his mom to be well and living. We have made the decision to act decisively. Let's start by blocking all of their numbers, including Emily's, Mom's, Dad's, and even the flying monkeys they called after me. My grandparents are the lone exception, and they have always been accepting and encouraging. Second, we're investigating legal safeguards. Greg fears they may try something desperate because of their antagonistic behavior. Next week, we're meeting with a lawyer to go over our choices. I will always be perplexed by their claim to be family and their utter disregard for my life. However, I'm over my guilt. I will no longer allow them to control me. A mother who would put her life in danger to appease individuals who have never truly shown her love is not worthy of my son. Thank you to everyone who left a remark on my previous post. You made it clear to me that I'm being a responsible mother and defending my family, not being selfish. Standing up to those who ought to have protected you in the first place is sometimes necessary. I'll provide another update if something noteworthy occurs, but hopefully this will be the last one. With my true family, my spouse and son, who genuinely appreciate my existence, I'm prepared to go on. Update 2. I've blocked everyone for 2 weeks now. I assumed that was the last of it, but my mother managed to get in touch with me using a temporary number. Just the two of us, not Greg, need to talk. I consented to meet at a nearby cafe even though every instinct told me not to attend. For obvious reasons, I picked a public spot, and Greg was waiting in his car nearby in case something happened. She began talking about Emily's melancholy and how she's dying of the anguish of not being able to have children as soon as I sat down, in what was obviously a prepared speech. No, how are you? No recognition of their prior actions, just a direct focus on Emily's misery. My mother pushed a business card across the table and said, the doctors say this is her last chance. According to one fertility expert, you two are a fantastic fit. They are able to keep a careful eye on your cardiac health. She dismissed it as if it were a minor annoyance when I brought up the fact that my own doctors, who have been aware of my medical history for years, have expressly prohibited me from getting pregnant again. Doctors are constantly too cautious. According to Emily's specialist, the risks are controllable. When Mom began discussing family legacy and how Emily should be given more genetic inheritance than I did, the discussion took an even more sinister turn. She did say that, after all, I've heard the same arguments about my being a flawed child my entire life. She replied, I should have known you'd be difficult about this. As I got up to go. Emily has always made you envious. This is your opportunity to at last take action for the family. I felt oddly at ease as I walked out of the cafe. I finally saw my mother clearly for the first time, not as a parent who didn't love me enough, but rather as someone who never considered me a person, only a tool to be used for Emily's gain. Greg inquired about how things went on the way home. I informed him of my mother's remarks about family legacy and her rejection of my health concerns. After a period of silence, he said, You know what? They're not worthy of you? They have never done so. He is correct. They are unworthy of me, my forgiveness, or another opportunity to harm me. I've given my mother one last message. I won't put myself in danger or leave my child an orphan because of Emily's wishes. We will not be talking about it again. Don't get in touch with me again. Tomorrow, I'm going to change my number. Sometimes quitting the game completely is the only way to win. Update 3. My father began sending increasingly threatening messages from various phones a week after the cafe incident involving my mother. I was particularly drawn to the most recent one. Your mother is devastated. Emily is in pieces. You have given us no other option, even if we didn't want to do this. There are repercussions for actions. My grandmother's voice was tremulous when she called. I heard your parents conversing with an attorney. They're looking for legal means to compel you to do this. They may use laws pertaining to family obligations and medical rights. Although they made reference to court orders and medical evaluations, I'm not entirely sure what they have planned. Evidently, they have persuaded themselves that they may be able to contest my own doctor's opinion because Emily's fertility specialist claims the risks are tolerable. They're even considering attempting to demonstrate that my reluctance isn't due to valid medical concerns, but rather to illogical family resentment. Additionally, my grandmother disclosed that Emily's 46-year-old husband is genuinely opposed to their plan. He believes that risking someone's life for this is crazy, but Emily and my parents have essentially cut him off from the conversation. That family at least has one sensible member. I called my doctor's office right away and asked them to implement additional security measures to lock down my medical records. I then got in touch with 3 different family law businesses. The first 2 expressed sympathy but stated that they would have to look into this peculiar circumstance. But the third one was just what we needed. When the lawyer heard the whole scenario, she became enraged. They cannot legally compel you to serve as a surrogate. It would be considered reproductive coercion and would not be tolerated by any court. However, we must take the initiative. She is assisting us with creating cease and desist letters and preparing the necessary papers for a restraining order. Additionally, we are recording every message, phone, and contact attempt. According to the attorney, if we require legal protection in the future, we must establish a distinct pattern of harassment. The majority of our legal expenditures are covered by Greg's company's excellent legal insurance plan. Even if it didn't, I would sell my car if I had to, he stated. Last night, he informed me, your safety is worth everything we have. The most bizarre aspect of it all is that they still act as though they are the victims and that I am the one who is acting irrationally. As if compelling someone to put their life in danger is some sort of admirable sacrifice, my mother reportedly informed my grandma that sometimes love means making difficult choices for the family. I'm exhausted, so exhausted. But I'm no longer scared. Let them play their games and try their legal threats. Truth, the law, and real medical proof are all on my side. Above all, I am supported by individuals who sincerely care about my life and welfare. Update 4. The legal threats began 2 weeks ago, and now my whole extended family is involved in this nightmare. During their recent family get-together, which I was obviously not invited to, my aunt from Texas called yesterday and sobbed about having to see Emily endure yet another unsuccessful IVF effort. The most unsettling aspect. The story has been entirely altered by my parents. My cousins claim that they're telling everyone that I'm just using my heart ailment as an excuse because it has significantly improved. They've even implied that I'm declining because I want to see Emily suffer because I'm envious of her success. The cryptic Facebook postings that my mother's sisters have begun sharing about selfish family members and the value of sacrifice for family were what truly caught me off surprise. Everyone in the family is aware of who they are referring to, even though they aren't specifically addressing me. I've received messages from some distant relatives I haven't seen since I was a child expressing their disappointment with my decisions. My cousin Sarah, 39F, is the one bright spot in all of this. She personally contacted me to express her anger with everyone's actions. She wrote, "I recall how they treated you as a child. They're being crazy. Don't let them guilt you into this." At the next family get-together, she even volunteered to talk about her personal encounters with my parents' partiality. These flying monkeys are unaware that last night Emily's husband spoke with Greg in secret. He fears that because of all this harassment, Emily and my parents will end up in legal hot water. He attempted to reason with them, but they aren't listening to anyone because they are so focused on achieving their goals. I've already made up my mind. I wrote a mass email to my entire extended family last night that had only the medical facts about my heart problem, along with a statement from my cardiologist on the risks of getting pregnant again, without any drama or accusations. I concluded it by saying that my lawyer would handle any further harassment and that I would no longer discuss surrogacy. Then, with the exception of my grandparents and cousin Sarah, I blocked every member of my family. Greg assisted me in creating new social media profiles for close friends only, using a different identity. It's strangely freeing, but it seems like entering witness protection. Yesterday, my youngster questioned me about why we no longer see Grandma and Grandpa. I told him that sometimes we have to avoid individuals who don't respect our limits, even if they are family, even if it breaks my heart. After giving it some consideration, he remarked, "Like when Tommy at school doesn't stop when I say no. Children are more capable of understanding than we realize." I've learned from this whole experience that my true family isn't always the folks with whom I share DNA. It's the people who love me without conditions, who respect my right to life and who cherish my presence above and beyond what I can do to others. Update 5. I sent out a bulk email to the extended family a month ago. The result was different from what I had dreaded, yet it was precisely what you would expect. Genuine peace is something I've never experienced before thanks to my new phone number and secret social media profiles. Through my grandma, I heard what is likely to be my mother's final message to me. "You've let this family down for the last time. You put your self-interest ahead of Emily's happiness. You shouldn't anticipate being welcomed back." Oddly, I felt a tremendous sense of comfort instead of pain as I read those words. What I've understood all along, that my sole worth was what I could do for Emily, was now expressed aloud. This morning, my lawyer called to let me know that Emily was contacted by her fertility clinic. They wanted to make it clear that they had never authorized surrogacy agreements involving a person with my medical background. It seems that neither Emily nor my parents had ever brought up my cardiac ailment. This only serves to highlight their lack of concern for my well. The most unexpected result. No more worrying about family get-togethers, dread when my phone calls, or persistent feelings of inadequacy. I'm sleeping better than I have in years. Greg also noticed, saying, "I'm laughing more freely and smiling more." In this brand new, drama-free setting, our youngster is flourishing. We began Sunday board game nights as a new family tradition last weekend. I had a profound realization as I sat there and watched him laugh with Greg. This is how families should feel: secure, affectionate, and welcoming. Sometimes my grandmother comes to visit, but she always makes sure my folks are unaware. Last time, she brought old pictures of me as a baby that I had never seen before. As I looked at them, I saw a contented little girl who had no idea that she would spend decades attempting to win affection that ought to have been given without conditions. I'm finally providing the protection that little child needed from those who never valued her. She deserved better. I want to express my gratitude to everyone on Reddit who helped me along the way. Your remarks made it clearer to me that defending myself was a matter of survival rather than selfishness. You showed me that a true family doesn't require you to sacrifice yourself for them. If you're wondering whether it's wrong to shield oneself from a toxic family, the answer is no. Your limits are legitimate, your health is important, and your life has worth. Walking away from folks who don't love you enough can sometimes be the bravest thing you can do. Since there is really nothing else to say, I will no longer be updating the story. I've closed the chapter on my dysfunctional family. With the family I've chosen, the ones who genuinely want me to live to read them, it's time to concentrate on writing fresh, healthier chapters. But hold on, shortly after I posted this update, two surprising events occurred. First, my lawyer received a legal letter from Emily's fertility clinic. As it turns out, my parents tried to conceal my heart ailment by falsifying my medical records. A report regarding this unlawful effort at medical fraud is already being filed by the clinic. The second was that Emily's husband had had enough. In the family group chat, he revealed how my parents and Emily had conspired to conceal my illness from the doctors. He disclosed that Emily was aware of my near-death experience while I was pregnant, but she had purposefully kept it a secret from everyone. The response from the extended family was prompt. Suddenly, the aunts and cousins who had been disparaging me stopped talking. My Texas aunt apologized over the phone, claiming she was unaware of the effort at medical fraud. Since then, a number of family members have stopped communicating with my parents and Emily, describing their behavior as completely illegal. Last week, Emily's husband filed for divorce because he couldn't stand being married to someone who would commit fraud and endanger her sister's life. My parents' flawless story about their precious child was ultimately shattered by this. Emily and my parents have been banned from all of the medical facilities that are associated with the reproductive clinic. According to my attorney, they might be subject to severe legal repercussions for their effort at medical fraud. Seeing their flawless facade fall apart after their own deeds were exposed feels like poetic justice. Even though I never sought retribution, all I wanted was to be left alone. You are truly set free by the truth. For those who wanted an update on the repercussions, let me say that sometimes people who spend their entire life controlling other people end up controlling themselves. Emily and my parents did this to themselves. I'm simply living my best life with folks who genuinely appreciate it while keeping a safe distance. Reddit, thank you. Your assistance has been amazing along our journey. When I initially wrote about the demand for surrogacy, I was overcome with self-doubt and remorse. Your remarks gave me strength and demonstrated to me that true family is about more than just blood. It's about love and respect. This community demonstrated that strangers can occasionally offer greater support than one's parents. I will always be appreciative of the way you gave me freedom and a voice.